And this is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Left 127. A couple of interesting guests tonight, but first I want to remind you all, those of you who didn't hear this last week, and even those of you who did, you're going to hear it again. I have a new book out. It's a book of autobiographical short stories, and it's a really good book. Though I say so myself, no, it really is a good book. And if you want to buy this book, in fact, you get a free look at the first story. Maybe that's a way. On Amazon, if you wanted to buy it, you can go to Amazon, Nook. There's a place called Kobo, which apparently makes the book available. These are e-readers. Amazon, Nook, Kobo, a place called Smashwords. And you can buy a paperback copy of the book, too, on Amazon. So best thing to do, go to Amazon and put in the title of the book, which is A Long Swim Upstream. My new book title is A Long Swim Upstream. If you put that in anywhere of those places and search for it, you'll find it. Go to Amazon, put that in. You'll get the first 20 or 25 pages for free, so you can see what the book is like. So, and then it's coming out in Apple iBooks and iTunes in a few days, I hope. Now, if you want to get more information about the whole thing, find out more about it and where to go, just go to my website, faderfiles.com, FEDERFILES.com, faderfiles.com. Also, one last thing. If you buy the book and you like the book, it's important to, these days, to put up customer reviews. Put up a good customer review on Amazon or anywhere else, and tell everybody, like on Facebook or Twitter, however else it is that you socialize with people these days, about the book. And I appreciate it. Okay, we're going to talk tonight to our first guest about student debt, which I think I read recently in the last several months has passed the $1 trillion mark, a tremendous amount of money. And of course, a lot of students who don't have jobs and don't have the money to pay back these debts, a lot of this, I think it's like 5 or 6 or 7% of this debt now is not being paid back, and maybe even more. So we're going to talk about student debt with our guest here, Kyle Romberg. And hi, Kyle.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Okay, let me introduce you, and then we'll go ahead here. Kyle is a small business owner, and what kind of business is it?
It's a graphic design business.
Okay, and an activist with the United Front Against Austerity and UFAA. It's an independent coalition of political activists and groups promoting programmatic solutions to the ongoing world economic depression. The group's current focus is to promote Senate Bill 897, which is Senator Elizabeth Warren's Bank on Students Loan Fairness Act, which would force the Federal Reserve to refinance Stafford loans, and you can explain that in a little while, at 0.75%, less than 1%. This bill not only saves students from the 6.8% loans set to take effect on July 1st, which is hard to imagine, it is in effect a partial nationalization of the Fed, opening the use of low-interest federal credit to refinance home mortgages, infrastructure, industry, and other elements of general welfare. So United Front Against Austerity, can you describe it more? Tell me more about it.
Like you said, it's basically a coalition of activists. We convened what was called the General Assembly back in October in New York, just to try to get a bunch of people at the table and trying to do what Occupy eventually failed to do, which was have a concrete program of economic reform and start with the program and move outward from there. Right now, we've got people from Rhode Island to San Diego to Colorado to pretty much everywhere in between. And we're active on Facebook. We're active through our website, various radio programs, and basically trying to push this program outward and use it to affect other groups and mobilize other groups.
So, first of all, we'll ask you a couple of more times, why don't you give the website where people can go to find out about this and what they can do about it?
The website is againstausterity.org, or on Facebook, it's facebook.com/United Front Against Austerity.
And when you talk about sort of an entire program about the economy and about about what's going on in this country, and especially what younger people are facing, you're talking about an entire program, as you mentioned before. It's not just the student debt. There's an approach to everything that's at the root of it, and how to get. And Like, for instance, Wall Street, Robin Hood tax, all these kinds of things, right?
Right. And I think the distinction is it's all economic reform as opposed to, we're not out talking about global warming or things like campaign finance reform, or, there are a lot of good issues that are left off the table that people within our group believe in, but we're sticking to, what is going to be important to somebody out there who's facing foreclosure or who's got a lot of student loan debt. These things that are actually going to move economic growth in a positive direction, as opposed to some of the more traditional, leftist issues.
Well, so that was one of the. I've spent a lot of time since the Occupy movement began. I have a whole other show dedicated to it, right? And I spent a lot of time interviewing people from Occupy from different places in the country, from down on Wall Street in Washington, and speaking to a lot of people. This is during the encampments after they were disbanded. Obviously, the main goal was to point out, if nothing else, the great sin and cause of all evil in this country, which is income inequality, and how it affects everything. But they didn't really, you say, and other people feel the same way, they didn't really get anywhere. I mean, they did inject that thought and point of view and just inject the whole idea into the American discussion. And people frequently talk about it now all the time, one way or another. I mean, obviously the Democrats and Republicans co-opt it and don't do anything about it because they're part of the problem. But still, they did that. And whether they meant to or not, they showed what was underneath the rock of American politics, which is basically a kind of a militarized state. So those things they achieved. But why then? Maybe you could explain more. Why didn't they go any further, or why didn't more come of that movement?
I'm not really. Webster Tarpley, who is kind of the unofficial leader of the UFAA, has written about this to some length and suggests that it's basically a conspiracy by certain operatives at the top of the Occupy movement to make sure they didn't go in that direction. We've had people who are involved in that and talking about these smaller working groups or certain regional occupies that were more militant with their demands. Mm-hmm. But it's more about what was the media coverage of it, what was the national leadership of it, and you find a lot of these people like David Graeber, or you find Ed Busters, or some of these groups that didn't want to see it go in this kind of a direction.
Well, Ed Busters, I never did understand. I mean, they're a Canadian organization, and
right.
it sort of irritated me that they kept sticking in their call for revolution from across the border.
Right.
So one of the problems I had with Occupy was, and maybe your organization is a little different. In fact, I have to hope it is, or maybe it won't go anywhere, is that they had, there was this relentless, horizontalism. In other words, absolutely no leadership.
Right.
But, all due respect, I've never seen in my entire life personally, or any place I've ever worked or been, or anything I've ever been involved in politically, or have I ever read about any movement that ever achieved anything without leadership.
Right. I mean, I've tried to run a small business of 5 people as a democracy, and even, that's a pretty difficult thing to do, let alone something with tens of thousands of people. I mean, and I think one of the what the UFAA does not have is any kind of funding or a real scale of the organization, but what we do have is centralized leadership on these ideas, and then sort of a decentralized network of activists where we're trying to say, here's the plan, put it in your hands, and you need to go out there and talk to people in your community or talk to your congressman or whatever it is.
Congressman, really? I mean, are you still in the zone where you think that makes any difference?
It makes a difference, and maybe this gets to the Elizabeth Warren bill where, Elizabeth Warren herself is not a perfect legislator. I don't, a lot of us don't like some of what she's had to say on anti-war kind of issues. She just voted against this Bernie Sanders amendment to allow this state-level labeling of GMO foods and things like that. But you get a person in a position like that is able to introduce a piece of legislation like this that has the potential to shift the whole dynamic of power and what's going on. It's sort of the same thing with the New Deal. You need to find the Franklin Roosevelts or the Abraham Lincolns, or those kind of leaders are not going to be coming out of Occupy Wall Street. They're going to be coming from a position of power, but you need to figure out how to use political pressure to change the political dynamic in where it's really going to matter.
Well, so we'll get back to the nuts and bolts of this whole student loan thing. But I mean, so last thing is that I guess you wouldn't be in favor of actively promoting a third party.
I think a third party would be fine. It's a lot harder, obviously, in the American political system to get that to happen than it is in some of these other places where where a coalition, a united front coalition, like has been successful recently in Greece, or it can work in other places. I think it's a lot more difficult. And if you look at the landscape right now, the Green Party sort of had its high water mark in 2000 when Ralph Nader was running, and since then, what do you have? Maybe the Ron Paul campaign and the last cycle. You're just never able to get above 10% of the vote, and where does that get you?
Well, then we're talking about the whole structure of the American political system, so we'll leave that go for the moment. So as far as student debt goes, can you give me some details about that? In other words, what is the current, well, first of all, what is a Stafford loan?
Stafford is one of the categories of federally subsidized loans. There's Stafford loans and PLUS loans and some of these other ones. Like you said, the total outstanding student loan debt is about $1 trillion, or is over $1 trillion. Average debt for a graduate is something like $25,000, and it skews. And that default rate that you mentioned, I think, is about right. It skews where public universities have a lower default rate, and some of these for-profit universities are pretty high.
Now, the students are borrowing this money from the schools or from a bank, but this is subsidized by the federal government. Exactly how does it work?
They're borrowing from the Department of Education.
Straight from the government.
Yeah,
okay.
The Stafford loan is a federal loan, but there are private bank loans, and then in grants and scholarships and all that kind of stuff.
Now you get a couple of years after you graduate, right, to presumably to find a job and to be earning money before you have to pay it back?
Yeah, I think the average repayment schedule is something like 10 years, but then there are people that are still repaying after 20 or beyond that.
What's the current rate?
The current rate is 3.4% on the Stafford loan.
Mm-hmm.
Private loans can go up to, approaching 10%. And the Stafford is the most coveted federal student loan, I think, with the lowest interest rate and the best terms. But on July 1st, it's scheduled to double to 6.8%. And so there have been a number of different proposals coming out to prevent that from happening.
Well, now, how did that happen in the first place? Such a huge increase on people who were just starting out their earning lives.
I think it's sort of like the sequester. It's just one of these automatic changes that happens based on deficit hysteria.
Mm-hmm. So what she's proposing is something which probably would, if she ever ran for president, would already gain her probably several million votes right off the bat. I mean, so many people are in a position where they would be saved so much money by doing this, right?
Yeah, I mean, it cuts 90% of the interest out of the loan from 3.4 or 6.8 in the worst case down to 0.75%.
So she probably would inevitably and will inevitably run smack up against all the people who say it has to be balanced with cuts somewhere else, right?
Right. Well, I think that right now what she's running up against is a wall of silence where you've got people talking about, there's a bill that just passed through the House introduced by John Klein, who's a Republican of Minnesota, where the rates would be based on the yield of a 10-year Treasury note. So it's a market rate plus 2.5%, and then it's capped all the way at 8.5%. Mm. And that's actually very similar to what Obama proposed in his budget request for next year. I think his rates are a little lower, but he doesn't even have a cap on the interest rate.
So we're talking about what she's proposing, if it actually became law, would be several $100 million a year in less money, or maybe a couple of $1 billion a year less money going to the federal government than they get now.
Well, I think that whole thing is a bit of a mystification. The idea are you talking about the idea that the federal government is making money on these student loans?
Not making money, but at least maybe breaking even or not losing as much? I mean, if her bill was successful and the interest payment is so much less than it even is now, then it's a loss, let's say, of income to the federal government, right?
I don't think so, because the federal government is borrowing that money in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they borrowing at in terms of having to sell treasury bonds and stuff, and then what are they losing in terms of the default rate? I think that's been kind of a mistake to promote that issue. Some people have pointed out from the right.
Well, I'm not promoting it. I'm just asking.
No.
Yeah.
But I think that has been pushed out there as an argument for the Elizabeth Warren bill that, hey, we're making money on students and we shouldn't be doing that. And that's not exactly the truth. And it's probably more true that we're losing a little bit of money because of these default rates.
But of course, what we're doing is investing in the country's future, right?
Exactly. And then consider that the default rate would obviously be a lot lower if you're cutting 90% of the interest out of the loan.
Do you have a student loan?
I don't.
You don't. So now, when we're talking about all this, everything is connected. So one of the things I printed out was, on your website about where it says "about" and on any website, we're talking about austerity here. Obviously, that's part of the name, right? Against austerity,
right?
And what the Republicans are doing all the time, and you even get to the point where somebody's so extreme that they don't seem to be actually human. Where, for instance, this senator from Oklahoma just recently said he was going to refuse federal emergency aid to his state from the tornado disaster unless they agreed in advance to cut various entitlement programs. I mean, this is the kind of lunatic that you get with this kind of right. So, second paragraph here on your statement about what you're about. It says "Make Wall Street Pay," and maybe you could explain what you mean there.
In our list of demands, and you can read that on the website. It's againstausterity.org/program. There's a fairly short list of things that we're active on, but the top two, one is, you talked about the Robin Hood tax. It's basically that, but increasing the rates to 1%. We're calling it a 1% Wall Street sales tax, and that would just be on the sales of stocks and bonds and derivatives and all these financial securities.
No, I've had a lot of economists on to talk about this favorably, of course. In fact, one guy who's a regular named Les Leopold, who even has written a couple of books about these kinds of things. And he's, I hear proposals everywhere from like 0.1% to up to, and this is the highest one I've heard, is a 1% sales tax. And it would bring in hundreds of billions, if not more, a year, right?
Yeah, it's hard to estimate because the volume of trading is obviously going to go down a lot. There's this whole market in the flash trading, especially of derivatives, where they're making pennies on the trade, but doing it at the speed of light. And I think that what is the group? CEPR, the Center for Economic Policy Research, or something, has done some good calculations on what they think it would bring in. It's like I said, it's hard to estimate, but we just 1%. I think part of the reason maybe that the Robin Hood tax is not politically motivating anybody is it's hard to go out there and say, hey, we want in their case, a 0.005% on derivatives. It
doesn't really strike people as too exciting,
right?
Yeah. So 1% sounds just about right to me. I mean, and basically a lot of times you're talking about very large organizations or hedge funds or Goldman Sachs, and they could afford the 1%. I mean, they're rich enough already. But of course, this is the last thing on earth that they'll ever allow their pet senators and congressmen to do. So it'll be quite a battle. I mean, for instance, just bringing that up, what do you think? How do you think people can do that? I mean, look at the Congress the way it is now. There was a front page article in the Times the other day about how the banks actually participated in the writing of laws overseeing the banks.
Right.
So who are you telling about this that could actually do anything about it?
And that's part of the problem. But I mean, you look back at the New Deal or at the period where Roosevelt was coming in, and it's just political mobilization right now is not going to do a whole lot potentially, but it's going to get to the point where it becomes a matter of survival for the Democratic Party or for some kind of a coalition to go along with these kinds of things. And we need to get them out there now, to have people demanding them, to have people introducing these kind of bills, and just to build that kind of a demand in the population.
Well, let me ask you this question. If you're saying a 1% tax on all the sale of, it said, and would be reducing the burden of predatory financial speculation, as long as they're making all these hundreds of billions of dollars a year on risky financial speculation, which plunged us into, this basically depression. I mean, I don't know what recession is a polite word for it. If they're making all this money, they're not going to stop doing that. Probably even if there was a 1% or 0.5%, they won't stop doing it. I mean, what is the sense of that? In other words, you're almost encouraging them to keep doing it by leveling a big tax on that. Why not just forbid them from doing it in the first place?
I don't think it would be good for anybody to forbid the stock market, let's say. I mean, why would that be? Because they crashed the economy doing that. They crashed the economy with derivatives, which are, certain. But there is a use for certain types of capital investment in companies. Or I think it's a good question, but I think it's, as long as it's happening, you want some of the revenue, but you need to make it punitive enough that they're not doing the most dangerous things. Some of those things which should be outlawed. Mm-hmm. We don't need credit default swaps, or we should have higher position limits. Glass-Steagall is one of the things that we support completely. But the things that are less outright criminal and dangerous, might as well let them go on and levy a heavy tax on them, right? Right. Okay. So have other places, other countries, or even in this country, have there been ever proposals or any tax like that at all? And what about other countries? Do they do this? There's currently the EU financial transaction tax, or the Euro Tobin, it's sometimes called, is effective in Italy. There's something like it on the books in Hungary, in France, certain types of stock transfer tax. I think there's one in India, which is more on corporate shares. Mm-hmm. And it's going on right now. This has been proposed, as far back as Keynes proposed a stock transfer tax. So. According to what you've written here, or what somebody's written on your website here, it says the turnover transactions in question, including stocks, bonds, options, futures, and derivatives, is estimated to exceed 5 quadrillion. That is to say, $5,000 trillion per year. Yep, that's the number we've got, just sort of compiled from different sources, and that's that's the sales of the same security back and forth over and over. So the total estimated size of the derivatives market, for example, is anywhere between 1 and 2 quadrillion, or 1 and 2,000 trillion. Well, certainly a 1% tax on something like that would basically fix the entire government's problem. Right. Yeah. Well, so since that's so obvious, I guess we're not going to see it. So. Yeah, and I think what we would say to something like the Robin Hood tax and people that support it is, A, get the rates up so that the voters are going to take notice and it's going to make a bigger difference. Mm. And B, call it a Wall Street sales tax. There are too many names for this thing where people just don't know about it. And if you go down to Walmart and ask someone what they think of a Tobin tax or what they think of the Robin Hood tax, you know what I mean? We need. Wall Street sales tax is a good way to put it. Yeah. Here you say, and this is for people probably who would bring this up, and I've had people call about this. We recommend a $1 million exemption to protect household level investment, right? Right, and just if somebody is saving for their retirement or cashing in their 401k or whatever, it's, I think that's not that big of a deal for somebody anyway, but just as a way to make it a little more politically popular. This is aimed at professional speculators and not at somebody dabbling in the stock market. So, I can only hope that this happens, because it would be the simplest single solution to almost all the budgetary problems. I mean, what the money is spent on is another whole argument. But and that's the other problem, I think, with some of these, with the Robin Hood tax in particular. They've got groups who want it to be used for everything from global warming to AIDS to this, that, and the other, and it needs to be used to stop the sequester, to make sure these things like everything from Head Start to special education to NIH grants, all these things that are being cut right now, protecting Medicaid and Medicare, and make sure that those things are all shored up first before we start spending it on other things.
But if the money landed, if this money lands in the U.S. Treasury, right?
Right.
Who's to say that Congress and the president won't just go spending on the NSA and occupying and invading various other countries, building weapons and everything else like they usually do?
I guess you either go with that problem or you just let Wall Street keep taking it. You know?
Okay, I'm just poking. That's all.
No, I hear you.
All right. So if you just tuned in, we're listening to Kyle Romberg, and he is with. Why don't you give the website and the group again? It's
the United Front Against Austerity, and the website is againstausterity.org.
I actually came across your organization walking along near Hunter College in New York City.
Oh, great.
Taking photographs on my way somewhere, and there's sort of bills or notices posted on every lamppost all over the place there.
Yeah, we've got some active groups in New York City, D.C., even out as far as Lincoln, Nebraska, just people sort of taking the initiative to go out and do those kinds of things, leafleting, handing out flyers, intervening at different kinds of demonstrations, giving speeches, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So now let's go on to number 2 on your program here, and you can explain it. And there's a lot about the economics I don't understand. In fact, most I don't. So maybe you can explain this. Nationalization of the Federal Reserve System to provide 0% credit for production. America's monetary and credit policy is controlled by a clique of unelected, unaccountable Wall Street bureaucrats, et cetera, et cetera. Are you talking about... You're not talking about ending the Federal Reserve System, but so much as nationalizing it. Maybe you can get into some details?
Yep, and this gets us also back to the Elizabeth Warren bill. The Fed is basically, I think that some of the people who are interested in ending the Federal Reserve misunderstand what it is. It's the Fed doesn't make money, and the Fed is not taking our money. The Fed is basically Wall Street's open back door into the U.S. Treasury. They bailed out in the 2008 bailout. They lent something like $27 trillion in loans and loan guarantees to prevent the banks from failing, which the banks profited on.
At what percent interest?
It varies down to near zero, and there's the federal funds rate and the discount window, and that all varies, but it's all basically near zero.
Whereas if you wanted to buy a car or a house, or you want to take out a student loan, you've got to pay 10 times, 20 times as much as that.
Right.
Well, that's great.
And this gets at the essence of what credit is and what the national debt is supposed to represent. One of the first things that Congress did in the 1780s, or I guess it's 1790s, is to establish a national bank. And basically using national debt, or assuming national debt, to pay for things like infrastructure, and you can get at this by reading Hamilton's reports on credit and report on manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And basically, what we're proposing is to take an example of infrastructure. It's estimated that we need $3.6 trillion in infrastructure upgrades over the next 10 years. But where are we going to get that from in the Treasury? So basically, what we want to do is force the Fed to act like a national bank and say, you're going to buy $3.6 trillion in these long-term bonds, century bonds of 100 years, 0% interest from the states. And
so the Fed, if it was nationalized, buys these bonds from each state.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
And it doesn't even need to be nationalized. It needs to just be compelled to do that, which is actually what Franklin Roosevelt did during the New Deal, to get the Fed to give them the rates they needed on things like bonds. Nationalizing the Fed is going to be a big political hurdle, but if you can take an issue, say these Oklahoma tornadoes or Hurricane Sandy, you want to have an emergency reconstruction bond, mm-hmm. All right, we'll sell you a $10 billion bond or whatever it is for Oklahoma to the Fed. We're going to pay you back over 100 years at 0% interest. And it costs nothing to the taxpayers because that money is just sitting in the national debt, and it's being slowly extinguished by when the money returns in the form of taxes to the Treasury.
What? Let me ask you this. You seem to know something about this. Why was there a need to establish a national bank in the first place?
Mostly just because the finances were a complete mess, and they couldn't do much international trade. They didn't have the money to be doing infrastructure. And the first national bank was something of a hybrid where it did have private investors.
Mm-hmm.
I think the federal government's portion of stock ownership was 70%, and then 30% was private. But that federal government's portion was financed by the debt itself. So they didn't there was no current revenue that was put into that bank stock. It was just, it was basically an IOU to themselves.
So currently, the Fed, is that a completely government-controlled agency, or is that a quasi-government agency, or is it a private agency?
It is private. I mean, the Board of Governors is appointed by the president. Bernanke is appointed by Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm. What about the Federal Reserve directors in all these different cities?
Yeah, all those regional banks. I mean, they would probably call themselves quasi-governmental, but it's private. I mean, I think even Alan Greenspan has come out and said it clear as a bell in his testimonies from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, so how do they get on the board of the Federal Reserve of St. Louis, for instance?
I am not quite sure, to be honest.
But voters don't vote for them.
No.
And the president doesn't appoint them at that level?
No, president only appoints the directors who are in New York.
So these people who otherwise might have jobs, these people come from the banking industry?
Yes.
Oh, so the banks get these people on the local board there, and then they loan money to the banks?
Right.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah. But and part of the reason you don't want to end the Fed is because of they are the buyer of last resort for U.S. Treasury bonds. There's been a couple times where the U.S. is running out of money and goes to a bond auction and nobody shows up. You've got the Fed there to say, okay, we're going to take your IOU.
But this is what confuses me, and I know this may sound stupid, but I don't understand economics. They will they're the buyer of last resort. They'll buy these bonds, and your program is to actually, make them buy these bonds, to make them do this, to loan this money at 0% interest and buy the state bonds. So they buy with whose money? Where does the money come from that the Fed has to buy all this?
It comes out of thin air right now.
Well, what does that mean exactly?
It means that the Federal Reserve does not have reserves. They're not lending money to, if they go and buy currently U.S. Treasury bonds, they're not buying them out of its current reserves. They're printing the money out of thin air, and they are accepting basically an IOU from the government that we're going to repay these bonds over, X amount of years at X percent.
They print the money?
I mean, print is, they issue the money.
They issue the money based on the authority of the United States government.
Correct.
So who actually, let me get down to the bottom of this. Who actually prints money? The Mint, right? The U.S. Mint?
Yeah, but I think the actual, the total volume of money is greater than the volume of printed money. The money that exists in the national debt is on paper.
Well, here's my question then, based on what you've answered to these earlier questions. Who needs them? Why can't people, if they want to borrow money at 0%, why can't the government itself? Why do we need middlemen like this who are bankers to begin with?
And we don't. That's the whole point, is that we want to bring this in, turn this into a branch of the government. Basically bring it into the U.S. Treasury. So
they'd be buying their own government's bonds.
They would. In what we're talking, how it works now is that the federal government borrows from the Fed and spends into the economy. What we're talking about is using the Fed to lend into the economy. So not spending, but lending to the states, or to, if it's an industrial bond, let's say, that the Fed could lend a low interest bond to the commercial banking system, who's then going to turn around and give a 1 or 2% loan to a manufacturer or to an agriculture or whatever. So then a local commercial bank, or even a bank like the Bank of America, all these banks that got
the Federal Reserve money at almost no interest rate at all,
Right.
are charging larger interest rates to everybody else in the world for
Right.
any other kind of loan. It seems to me completely immoral, and possibly it should be illegal for them to be making a profit off of our own money.
Right. And that's the problem with not attaching any strings to these loans. It's just, they're bailing them out, and then now they've got this quantitative easing, which is basically the Fed is directly purchasing toxic assets from the banks at like $85 billion a month, I think it is now.
Really? So they're taking on all their bad debts, loaning them money at almost no interest, and they're loaning all of us money.
Right.
And we have to pay them back at higher interest rates. And what an extraordinary con game. I don't think I've ever heard anything that big in my life.
Nope.
So your solution is, again?
Our solution is at first, just to compel the Fed to buy bonds from states, to buy bonds from, in the case of student loans, from the Department of Education at 0% or very low interest and at long terms.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually to take that function entirely under the Treasury, to make it a creature of law instead of political pressure. If
I had a small business and I wanted to start building solar panels under your new system, where would I go to get the money as a loan?
With things like public infrastructure, I think it would be reasonable to have the Fed dealing directly with the states. For something like industry or agriculture, I think eventually you're going to need to re-regulate the banking system, make sure that those banks are solvent and secure, and then be lending into to be buying bonds from commercial banks under these certain terms. They're going to say, here's our schedule of approved categories of lending, one of which is building solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
And J.P. Morgan Chase or whatever, bank of wherever you live is going to sell a bond and say, okay, we can handle $50 million worth of those, and then turn around and lend it to you at a slightly higher percent.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a huge competitive advantage for manufacturers and for agriculture or whatever. That's a part of the problem with why manufacturing has all but died in this country, is the cost of capital, where you've got countries like Japan who are directly supporting their manufacturers in that way.
Mm-hmm. What about just nationalizing all the banks?
I think you don't want to. I think there's something to be said for keeping competition and risk management in there, just so that it doesn't turn entirely into a political game. But
oh, I see.
If you want to take your example, if you want to manufacture solar panels, at some point somebody needs to take that risk and say this is a good business to invest in, and we don't need to be putting all of that on the shoulders of the Treasury, but just controlling the flow of credit and controlling what it goes to. And if you're in a business that's not, let's say you want to make pornography or something that's not in the production schedule, go take your chances in the market,
Well, pornography is as American as apple pie. But you know what, maybe there's some people who would like to, do you have some time to stick around and see if there's any calls about this?
Yeah, sure.
What we need to do is take a break, though. This is Kyle Romberg, and he is part of an organization called, help me here, UFAA.
United Front Against Austerity.
All right, I keep shuffling papers here and I lose the title that I had. United Front Against Austerity, and it's againstausterity.org online. And if you're interested in calling and speaking to Kyle, the number here is 866-997-4748. We're talking about nationalizing the Fed. We're talking about a 1% tax on Wall Street, all the trading on Wall Street. With an exception for household investing or income. 866-997-4748. Give us a call, and when we come back from the break, we'll take your calls. Thanks.
Bill Press on Sirius XM Left.
The Senate begins debate on immigration reform, but John Boehner already says that bill will be dead on arrival when it reaches the House. President Obama adopts a new policy limiting the use of drones, and Anthony Weiner is counting on the God of second chances. You'll find out all about that right here on The Bill Press Show.
The Bill Press Show, mornings at 6 East, 3 West on Sirius XM Left, 127.
Tired of paying outrageous prices for Viagra? Well, we have great news for you. Now you can finally get Viagra at huge discounts. Healthy Man allows you to save up to $500 on Viagra. Why pay U.S. pharmacy prices of $15 per pill or more when you can get Viagra for less than $3 a pill? Call today and get 40 Viagra pills for only $99. This can cost as much as $600 at your local pharmacy. You can't afford not to call us. If you want Viagra at the lowest prices, never pay $15 a pill pharmacy prices again. Get Viagra for less than $3 a pill. Call 800-834-4964 today and save up to $500 and get 40 pills for just $99. Healthy Man is fast, easy, and affordable. Operators are waiting at 800-834-4964 to take your call now. Call 800-834-4964. That's 800-834-4964. Again, 800-834-4964.
These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
If you're considering putting hardwood, bamboo, or laminate floors in your home, there are only 2 words you need to know. Lumber Liquidators. Lumber Liquidators has unbeatable prices and the best selection of high-quality flooring anywhere. So take the first step toward that new floor and call 800-669-8130 for your free catalog. It's filled with tips and ideas and unheard-of deals on hardwood, bamboo, and laminate floors that you just won't find at the big box stores. Lumber Liquidators buys directly from the mills in incredible volume, and their global buying power means they can offer you incredibly low prices other stores can't even come close to. But what it really means is you can finally afford a gorgeous new floor. So call 800-669-8130 today and we'll rush your free catalog out to you. Forget the big box stores with big flooring prices. Get the hardwood floor you've always wanted for prices you never thought possible. Call Lumber Liquidators now at 800-669-8130. That's 800-669-8130. Again, 800-669-8130.
This Memorial Day weekend, SiriusXM has all your motorsports needs covered. Sunday, Formula One Racing's premier event, the Monaco Grand Prix.
Sebastian Vettel, who comes on the final turn.
8 a.m. Eastern on Sirius 92, XM 208, Sports Zone on the SiriusXM app. Then it's the Indy 500 from Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Pre-race coverage with Jack Arute begins at 9 a.m. Eastern on SiriusXM 211. And the Coca-Cola 600 at 6 p.m. Eastern on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio Channel 90.
On Memorial Day weekend, the biggest races in motorsports are on SiriusXM.
SiriusXM Left 127, Pride.
Greatest respect. The uncle that I was named after was shot down over Europe in 1945.
SiriusXM Left 127.
Okay, we're back. This is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Left 127. Kyle Romberg is on the phone. Who do we have? Greg from Salt Lake. You're on.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
Yeah, I was listening to Carl, and a lot of what he says makes sense, but the problem is the 73% of white people in this country that's not going to go for it.
73? Did you say 73%?
Yeah, about 73% of this country's white.
Yeah.
And they're going to play all the other issues, the abortion, the gays, the black-white, the religious angle, and they're just not going to stand together and make it happen.
I just don't understand. Let me ask you a question. I don't understand what white and black has to do with an issue about student loans.
What it has to do with. I say exactly what it has. Just like if you own a business, if 75% of your customers are white, that's who you pay. They're the ones who make the market move. And until the 72, 73% of white people in this country stand up and say, this is enough with this shit, nothing's going to happen.
Well, when we're talking about student loan, we're talking about student loans of $1 trillion in debt. That student loan about a huge amount of. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What are you trying to say?
Exactly. I mean, when it comes to student loans, when it comes to the housing problem, when it comes to the stock market, still a vast majority of white people say enough's enough. This government's not going to move.
So all the black people have already said enough is enough, and the white people have to join them, right?
No. It doesn't matter what blacks or others say, and you know that just like I know that.
I don't know. I'm not getting the sense of your division here. We're talking about an issue that everybody suffers from, but all of a sudden you're dividing it up.
No, I'm not. I understand. We all suffer from it.
Okay.
But until the majority of this country, which is white, stands up and says enough's enough, nothing's going to happen. Everything that happens for people of color in this country is because enough white people stood up. And you know that, and I know that. And that's the problem with no one wants to say that.
You just got to say it, and we're gonna move on to another call that addresses the issue better. Who do we have on? Elliot from where are you from? Go ahead, you're on. Elliot.
I'm in Iowa.
Go ahead.
In Iowa today. My question is somewhat like I see the flaw in the college student loan thing as being after you've got the education and the loan comes due. Okay? Because from my experience, if you don't pay a certain amount, the loan keeps mounting. So if you don't have a job that can pay the amount that's necessary to keep to bring the loan down, okay, then you end up with a situation where it continues to mount. So you may borrow $11,000, and then 20 years later you owe $50,000 because you haven't paid enough money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it seems to me that there's a real flaw in it when you know there's a certain expectation that you should be able to pay it back, but are the jobs really there for somebody who's starting in on their career in order to pay all that back, still survive, be able to live, et cetera, et cetera. I guess I'm asking the question I'm asking of your guest is, isn't there a certain expectation that's being lost? And that people can't pay it back at a low end. How is it that they would expect that they would be able to pay it off at a high end?
Kyle, did you want to?
There's another bill, and I can't remember who introduced it. It might have been Chaka Fada, that would tie the repayment to a percentage of your income and say, okay, you're not going to pay more than 10% of your adjusted income, and the loan expires in 20 years or something like that. And maybe that is something that people want to encourage their senators to add as an amendment to the Warren bill, or I can see how that's an issue.
And that sounds more reasonable, because from my experience, one of the big problems is the collection agencies who have absolutely no interest in doing anything but making phone calls that don't get anywhere. And they make money for every phone call they make. I like that. I like that suggestion from your guest. I think that's
okay.
That's a more reasonable representation of it. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, Kyle, did you want to add something to that?
No, but I would answer. I would address what Greg was bringing up before, and I think what he's saying is right to the extent that something like police brutality is a real daily issue in communities of color or disadvantaged communities. I was out on a job yesterday in a low-income area in Chicago at a hospital that serves all Medicare patients, or Medicaid, excuse me. And people in that situation are not going to get energized by an anti-war movement, or they're not going to get energized by, gay marriage or something like that. And on the other end, people in upper income communities are not going to get energized by police brutality or Medicaid or things like that. So what we need to do that the Democratic Party assiduously fails to do is go for these class-based, hard-hitting economic reforms
which affect everybody.
Right.
Okay, that's all I was trying to explain.
Yep.
I don't think that division is all that helpful sometimes. Right. Let's take one more call. Who do we have? John in Michigan, you're on.
Yeah, Mike, had a good talk with you last week about Garfield, that book about Garfield.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Hey, Matt Taibbi has written extensively on this subject, and you get done with the articles. If you go into his archives, you can just be absolutely apoplectic with this crap. He was talking about two of the biggest bankers. I don't know if it was Jamie Dimon's wife, but it was two guys that were like the top in flying in that orbit as presidents of the banks. Their two wives partnered up and were able to get some type of designation to get some like vulgar amount, like $20 million at 0% to just use as, I forget how they used it, but it was just one of the examples of how the bankers were just raiding and taking advantage of this whole outlay of money that had nothing to do with bringing the economy back. And I'd like to listen to your comments on that. Thanks.
Kyle, go ahead.
Just one of the examples of how the bankers were...
Yeah, okay. Sorry, we lost the call. Go ahead, Kyle.
Sounds about right. A lot of the bailout money went to Deutsche Bank, and it went to foreign banks to secure their financial position.
So the entire American public, their tax money, even the promise of later money, was devoted entirely to bailing out banks who paid huge bonuses, gigantic salaries, and did not really help out America.
Right. I think one of the mistakes people make is to think, well, we just need a better income distribution. We need to close these corporate tax loopholes, or we need a more progressive income tax, and those things are fine, and we do need those, but because all of the capital flows are going into Wall Street and lining people's pockets, the money is getting distributed up to the top, 0.1% or whatever. But the economy is not growing. There's not enough manufacturing. There's not enough profit in family farms and those kind of things at the bottom of the ladder. So the pie is shrinking, and Wall Street gets a bigger and bigger piece. So,
well, maybe if they were compelled to loan the money at very low rates, then things would change, right?
Yeah, and we don't even need to worry about, them loaning the money. It's just compelling the Fed or a national bank to create that national debt as credit to the real economy.
So is there any prominent politician taking this point of view now in Congress?
I'm sure people like Bernie Sanders and like Kucinich in the past have had things to say about nationalizing the Fed, but as far as I know, the big window here is this Elizabeth Warren bill, and the big difference is not just that it's 0.75%, but she's saying force the Federal Reserve to loan that money to the Department of Education.
And as you're saying, that's a door that opens up into forcing the Fed to do other things like that.
It's kind of like the Pandora's box, where when people see, oh, wait a minute, we can basically fix the student loan situation with no cost to taxpayers. Mm-hmm. Why aren't we doing that for the mortgage market? Why aren't we doing it for infrastructure, industry, disaster relief, all these kinds of things where that money can never be found?
Well, why don't you give your website again, and then obviously people should find out what Elizabeth Warren's website is and go to support this bill.
Yep. Our website is againstausterity.org, and on Facebook it's facebook.com/United Front Against Austerity, and then Elizabeth Warren's site is warren.senate.gov, and she's got the bill text and endorsements by universities and things like that up there.
And I guess you could sign a petition or can put your name down somewhere to support it, right?
Yeah, she's had a few. Move On had a big petition.
Okay.
Some other groups of that caliber. So.
All right, listen, thanks for coming on tonight. And againstausterity.org is where you need to go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Left 127. We will be back after the 6 o'clock news to talk about recent revelations, thousands of pages under the FOIA Request Act, of how the Homeland Security and other government agencies infiltrated and surveilled the Occupy movement and God knows who else, completely against every possible constitutional guarantee that we have. So hear it and weep, and maybe there is something we can do about it. That'll be after the 6 o'clock news. And that's all I got to say right now. So it's all yours, Mr. Engineer.
Alex Bennett on Sirius XM Left.
The brightest guy in America is Marco Rubio. He called for Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service to resign over the agency's targeting of major Tea Party groups. I strongly urge that President Obama demand IRS Commissioner's resignation effective immediately. The IRS Commissioner in question, Douglas Shulman, ended his 5-year term in November.
The Great American Broadcast. Alex Bennett. Mornings at 7 East, 4 West on Sirius Sirius XM Left 127.
Police called and broke the bad news to Charles. His personal and financial information was found on an identity thief's computer disk. Nervous and confused, Charles called LifeLock, the industry leader in identity theft protection. LifeLock went into action, uncovering multiple fraudulent credit applications the identity thief was trying to open in his name. LifeLock shut them down and helped him restore his good name and credit. Charles found out the hard way that identity theft is a global crime, a crime that's become so complex you simply can't fight it alone. Your personal and financial information is everywhere. Don't wait for a call from the police before you take action. Visit lifelock.com now or call and mention promo code SiriusXM to get a special 10% discount. Call 1-800-364-1456. 1-800-364-1456. 1-800-364-1456. See lifelock.com for details. Network does not cover all transactions and scope may vary.
Ice House America, the leader in automated ice vending, is pleased to introduce Iceborne, a franchise model based on a revolutionary technology. Fully automated Iceborne units dispense fresh ice on demand, and our smart ice remote management system makes it ideal for multi-unit owners. For a limited time, we're waiving the initial franchise fee, making Iceborne's low startup and operating costs even better. Learn more at www.ownicehouse.com. That's ownicehouse.com.
LJ has a great arm, but is too inconsistent to start at quarterback.
Ashley is usually a great basketball player, but chokes up when the game is on the line.
These players are great physically, but fall short with their mental game. Now they can do what elite athletes in Europe have learned. Go to iaimtowin.com. Take the Reese Motivation Profile for sports and discover your bad mental habits and what to do about them.
That's iaimtowin.com.
The Blend presents another SiriusXM Town Hall exclusive.
Please welcome Rod Stewart.
An hour of Q&A with rock icon Rod Stewart. Woo-hoo! Celebrate the release of Rod's latest album, Time, and the SiriusXM Sounds of Summer. Hosted by original MTV VJ and SiriusXM DJ Mark Goodman on The Blend, Channel 16, and on the SiriusXM app. For encore times throughout Memorial Day weekend, go to SiriusXM.com/TheBlend.
Sirius XM Left 127, Sacrifice.
Everybody who's brave enough to go out there, I really thank them, and I hope that they're safe.
Sirius XM Left 127.
AP Radio News. I'm Diane Kepley. There's high water in San Antonio. Dozens of people have been forced from their homes, and one person has drowned.
Was swept away by the water at Rhapsody and 281, and she was found around 10:30 this morning.
Another person is missing after being trapped in a car. Mayor Julian Castro says the river simply cannot handle all the rainfall the region has had in recent days.
We've seen between 7 and 9.75 inches of flooding in the San Antonio area in the last 15 hours, which is like the 1998 and 2002 floods that caused a lot of damage in our city.
Water is up to 4 feet high in some homes. Well, it didn't feel like graduation day in Moore, Oklahoma, but high school students put on their caps and gowns and accepted their diplomas. The ceremonies came less than a week after a powerful twister killed 24. More of the victims were buried today. In this week's Republican address, Senator James Inhofe vowed the people of Oklahoma would continue to rally to support one another.
The individuals who live through these storms and are volunteering in the recovery and the assistance efforts are America's real heroes. I've seen people from all corners of the state continue to flock to the devastated areas to give their time and their money.
A strong message for the cadets at West Point today about ending sexual assaults in the military.
You'll need to not just deal with these debilitating, insidious, and destructive forces, but rather you must be the generation of leaders that stop it.
Defense Secretary Hagel's message comes as the Pentagon is dealing with a series of sexual misconduct incidents, and a new report is out that shows the problem is growing. A French soldier has been stabbed in the throat outside of Paris. The incident comes just days after a British soldier was hacked to death on a London street. There was no immediate confirmation of any link between the attacks. This is AP Radio News. The head of the National Transportation Safety Board says the bridge collapse in Washington state is a wake-up call for the country. Debbie Hersman says the country needs to learn from what happened at the bridge 60 miles north of Seattle. 7 months after Superstorm Sandy, New Jersey and New York beaches are open and back in business. Despite the restored boardwalks, though, thousands of homeowners are still repairing the damage. Divers are searching for a pond in upstate New York for the pilot of a volunteer Angel flight that crashed Friday afternoon. 2 passengers were killed. President Obama is calling on all Americans to honor those who serve in the military on this Memorial Day weekend.
This weekend, as we commemorate Memorial Day, I ask you to hold all our fallen heroes in your hearts. And every day, let's work together to preserve what their sacrifices achieved, to make our country even stronger, even more fair, even more free.
In his weekly address, the president also made a pledge that all veterans should receive the care and benefits that they have earned. I'm Diane Kepley, AP Radio News.
And once again, this is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Left 127. For those of you who are just tuning in for the evening, don't forget, I have a new book out. And if you want to get more details about this, how you can read part of it for free online, how you can order it, and other information, go to my website. It's faderfiles.com, FEDERFILES.com, which is the same place you should go if you want to contact me about anything you hear on this program or just get in touch with me for any reason. There's a way to get in touch with me if you go to my website, faderfiles.com. Now, a lot of you have heard me mention this before, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the fact that during the course of the Occupy movement, and probably what still remains of it, what we saw, the face of a kind of corporate militarized state that we have, the face of it was local police, sometimes state police, charging into usually nonviolent demonstrators and almost exclusively nonviolent demonstrators, beating them over the head, throwing them on the ground, firing rubber bullets at them, in some cases permanently injuring some of them, pepper spray, you name it. Incredibly violent tactics against a bunch of people who were essentially nonviolent. And this is the response of the government to people trying to point out income inequality. But what we don't really know that much more about is something that lay way beneath the surface, is that it wasn't just the local cops. It was a coordinated effort between corporations, believe it or not, private corporations, and the government at the highest level. And we have somebody on today to talk about that. Beau Hodai. Is it Hodai or Hodai?
Hodai.
Hodai. Okay, Beau Hodai. And he is a freelance reporter and a regular contributor to the Center for Media and Democracy and publisher of DBA Press. What is DBA Press?
DBA Press is a website I started up about 3 years ago. Its primary function is it's a news publication, but it's also in large part a source materials archive. So basically the idea is all of the documentation behind a story is available in the archives to the public free of charge, so other researchers can utilize it. And
Center for Media and Democracy, I think we've heard of it before, but maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, CMD is an investigative reporting group. They've done some really great work over the past few years, especially exposing the activities of the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, through ALEC Exposed. They worked on several other issues, including banker malfeasance, environmental issues associated with the agribusiness industry. They're also a really great outlet, and I'm very proud to have worked with.
Now, this report, which is kind of a joint report of DBA Press and the Center for Media and Democracy, I'm going to read here from something from your website. It released the results, it says here, of a year-long investigation, Dissent or Terror, how the nation's counterterrorism apparatus in partnership with corporate America turned on Wall Street. And this is from, you say it's a kind of a distillation of thousands of pages of records obtained from counterterrorism and law enforcement agencies. And so you submitted FOIA requests?
Yeah, I submitted FOIA requests to the FBI and to the Department of Homeland Security. I also submitted public records requests to a number of law enforcement agencies, including, law enforcement / counterterrorism agencies, including the Phoenix Police Department, Bureau of Homeland Defense, And then I also submitted a records request relating to the employment of off-duty police officers to several police departments around the nation.
Did you say that the Phoenix Police Department has a Department of Homeland Defense?
Right.
Why would they need something like that?
Well, it's interesting, and it gets into the discussion on fusion centers. The Phoenix Police Department Bureau of Homeland Defense, as it has been explained to me by the Phoenix Police Department Public Information Officer, was founded in 2003, I believe, on the first day the nation hit you remember the old terror alert scale?
Oh, sure.
Right. So it's the first day the nation hit orange status, which was the highest status. The Phoenix City Council voted to create this counterterrorism entity within the Phoenix Police Department.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I first saw this, I actually submitted a public record.
You live in Phoenix?
No, I don't. I live in southern Arizona.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I got the response to a records request. I'd been seeking a specific document, and in the response to the records request that I submitted and obtained, this police officer stated that materials given to him by Homeland Defense had been destroyed. And so it really piqued my interest, because I thought he was referring to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and had just written Homeland Defense. But lo and behold, it turns out that it's not just the Phoenix Police Department. Police departments around the nation have these subunits, which are basically counterterrorism units. And they engage in, by and large, they're engaged in fusion centers.
What is a fusion center?
A fusion center is an information intelligence sharing entity that engages municipal, county, state, and federal law enforcement counterterrorism entities. You have everybody in there from, Phoenix Police Department in Arizona to, any other municipal police department.
Then you would have like the Arizona State Police, Department of Homeland Security. Would it be the FBI too?
Right. Like in Arizona, for example, you have like the Phoenix Police Department, the Tucson Police Department, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, and then at the state level you have the Arizona Department of Public Safety, which actually serves as the managing entity of the fusion center. And it's similar to like Florida. One of the fusion centers in Florida is managed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, which is sort of, the state law enforcement equivalent of a Department of Public Safety. And then above that, you have the FBI, which is involved in fusion centers nationwide, primarily through joint terrorism task forces, which are intelligence swapping entities in their own right. And then you, of course, also have personnel from the Department of Homeland Security, particularly the offices of intelligence and analysis and of infrastructure protection.
Infrastructure protection. So they didn't protect that bridge from falling down in Washington, did they?
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting to see what they're focused on. In so many cases they're focused on, it appears, activists and not necessarily other things that you might think they're focused on.
Now, I know that that in New York City, we have a fusion center in New York City, which is down near Wall Street, where else, that all of these agencies, these types of agencies, New York City Police Department, State Police, et cetera, work out of this extremely well-funded, I guess a lot of money comes from the federal government, well-funded surveillance agency. And at the same time, Goldman Sachs employees are invited routinely to come and sit down at the consoles with these people.
Right. And I definitely saw the same thing in records detailing the activities at the Arizona Fusion Center. They're having meetings with bankers who, were managers of banks or security personnel at banks who were the targets of Occupy Phoenix protests. And the depth of information sharing with the private sector was astounding to me. They were sharing information evidently with the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a private entity that includes representatives from hundreds of the nation's top corporations, lobby firms, law firms.
So our government is using surveillance tactics on us, which are probably unconstitutional, maybe even illegal on a local level, certainly on a national level, and sharing that private information, which they shouldn't even be gathering, with actual corporations.
Yes, they are. And, it's very interesting also speaking to the legality of it. I've had a lot of conversations with CMD Executive Director Lisa Graves. And, she was an assistant deputy attorney general. And she, at the U.S. Department of Justice, and she had worked in her time there to actually establish some sort of criminal predicate requirement for this type of surveilling or monitoring. And as I understand it, and again, I would encourage anybody out there who's interested in to do further research. But as I understand it, that there is not a requirement for any sort of predicate of criminal wrongdoing for either federal or state agencies to engage in this type of activity.
So they could pick anybody or any group based on their own volition without having to prove it or get a warrant or anything and just spy on them.
Right. And it's very disturbing. Like, for example, in Phoenix, the records I got, and it's detailed in this investigation, show that the Phoenix Police Department actually had a Phoenix Police Department Major Offender Bureau undercover detective infiltrated the Occupy Phoenix and other Phoenix activist groups, and this was going on for months. He was posing, under a false ID. He had set up a bogus Facebook page. He was hanging out with people in the park and gathering intelligence with them and going to meetings and all this stuff. And I asked the Phoenix Police Department public information officer, what sort of predicates, do you all cite of, suspected criminal activity to send somebody in to actually do this kind of in-depth infiltration? And he responded to me, I don't think we need to believe that there is any criminal activity going on. We're a public safety agency, and, anything involving a demonstration is a potential risk to public safety. So he said it right there. We don't need any suspicion of criminal activity to do this.
Well, they must love you out there, right?
I guess maybe they do.
Well, obviously these things are so extraordinary, except that they're not anymore. I guess the saddest part about it is they're not extraordinary, but we have to keep tabs on these people to know what they're doing. So the fusion centers, I don't know if you got any details about this. Obviously, it's not going to be in the papers that were released to you, but you're talking about hundreds of millions, maybe billions of dollars devoted by Homeland Security to setting these places up, right?
Right. Yeah, actually, I do have records on that stuff. What I did was I started hitting the Arizona Department of Homeland Security for records relating to the distribution of DHS, U.S. Department of Homeland Security grant funding. And, anybody out there who's interested in doing this type of thing, I strongly encourage you to do it. Currently, we do have, good enough open records laws and the Freedom of Information Act that we can essentially audit these government agencies. So I really, really encourage people to do this while we still have the ability to do it. Yes, so I got records relating to the DHS funding of these entities, and it's the amount of money that's going into this stuff.
Well, I know that they spent at least $100 million, Department of Homeland Security, providing money to the two cities where the conventions were held for advanced weapons and technology.
Are you talking about
the Democratic and Republican convention? Right. Homeland Security funded those two local police departments, Tampa and what was it, Charlotte? I forget which.
Charlotte.
Yeah, to the tune of $100 million to buy armored personnel carriers, that kind of thing. So essentially what we're talking about here is, as you say, almost like in the title of your article or your report, is that these days in the United States, to protest or dissent from what the government is doing is seen as a terrorist act.
Yeah, the most striking thing about it, too, is, like, for example, on this past, was it Tuesday, maybe May 22nd, or Wednesday, Matt Rothschild, the editor of the Progressive, who had written a cover story based on the report, was on Democracy Now! And Democracy Now! Had asked the Phoenix Police Department, basically, did you suspect that Occupy Phoenix people were terrorists, or did you treat them as such? And they said, no, we're an all hazards entity. And, the fact of the matter is, you look at this, you look at the people who are engaged in this, surveillance and monitoring from the state to federal level. I mean, they informed a special agent on the FBI Phoenix Joint Terrorism Task Force of Jesse Jackson's whereabouts when he was in Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
It's a Joint Terrorism Task Force. All of these other people involved in the Fusion Center who were involved in the monitoring of not only Occupy Phoenix, but other activist groups in the Occupy movement nationwide are called terrorism liaison officers. So it's incredibly disingenuous for them to say that, no, we didn't look at them as being a terrorist threat.
According to this is a note I printed out from the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security, established after September 11, 2001, lists 5 main tasks in its mission statement. Okay, 1 is the prevention of terrorism. 2, border security. 3 is immigration enforcement. Then 4 is cybersecurity and disaster response. I'm groping for the relationship of any of those things to the Occupy movement.
Well, it's interesting with the I guess there's little bits of that everywhere, in their rationalization. Like one thing, for example, cybersecurity stuff. As I understand it, FBI InfraGard, which is a public-private intelligence sharing partnership with many corporations in the FBI, a large part of its stated aim is cyber or protection from cyber threats.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, like potentially disaster, protecting us from disasters. A large part of the corporate involvement in the Homeland Security counterterrorism apparatus is through the stated aim of critical infrastructure and key resources protection. And that's stuff like, dams and nuclear power plants and stuff.
Well, now that makes sense. I mean, as a citizen, I wouldn't mind if they were providing.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right. It makes sense. But then at the same time, why through these CIKR, and that's what it's called, CIKR protection programs, are they sharing information about activist protests of banks with bankers? Why are they sharing information about activist groups with the head of security for J.P. Morgan Chase when Jamie Dimon decides he wants to come to town?
Mm-hmm.
It started out as one thing, dams and nuclear power plants, and now it's just, sharing information with the, powerful corporate interests. And it should also be noted that aside from power plants and dams, the definitions of CIKR that are contained in the Patriot Act and I believe the Homeland Security Act of 2003,
mm-hmm.
these are the definitions that are used for CIKR protection. Somewhere in there, they introduced the concept of basically protection of anything that would jeopardize morale in the nation, in the government, or
morale.
Yeah, morale.
So, like for instance, if a bunch of people with bullhorns were screaming at bankers that they were raping the United States, that's bad for morale, right?
It could, and also, I mean, not only could that affect morale, but another thing that's got lumped in with CIKR is sort of the idea of anything that could disrupt business as usual.
Now we're talking.
Right. So you could see how it's sort of, the stated aims have sort of morphed over time to, to the point where these people engaged at fusion centers, for example, can tell you with a guilt-free conscience that they're doing just exactly what they're supposed to do.
Well, I mean, you could say that it changed over time, but in fact, it never changed at all, right? So, I mean, they're protecting the interests they were always protecting.
Right. There was a slight shift. I mean, when fusion centers started appearing, they were strictly, counterterrorism things, but then through, executive orders and things like that, they quickly changed to an all hazards thing, which I think started in 2003. So, that was really one of the big shifts. While, counterterrorism certainly is their primary goal, and they retain the title of terrorism liaison officers and counterterrorism information centers and all of this, they technically are all hazards centers, which, as you might understand, is a pretty all-inclusive term.
So some of the things that are going on here at these fusion centers, One of them is Department of Homeland Security financing social media data mining. What is this now?
Well, two examples that I discussed in the report, and while both of these examples are in Arizona, I do know that the corporations that provide the software work with a number of fusion centers nationwide, so I hope people don't think I'm just talking about Arizona. This is nationwide.
Okay.
But what I was digging into in Arizona was in Phoenix, for example, the Phoenix Police Department Bureau of Homeland Defense was given something like $1,090,000 for the hiring of their intelligence analyst, the ACTIC intelligence analyst, to work out of the Arizona Counterterrorism Information Center, ACTIC. And so as part of that million-plus grant, they came through USDHS State Homeland Security Grant Program revenue stream. They also purchased for this analyst and also to be used by other people at ACTIC, this software suite made by SAS Memex. It's a Fusion Center Intelligence Management Solution Center module or something like that. It's got a very convoluted multi-word name. But anyways, this module cost them $600,000, and from what I can gather, it's basically an automated intelligence analyst in a box. You know, it handles multiple intelligence streams that are inputted into it. It aggregates data, collates data. From what I understand, it also very well may engage in the collection of open source intelligence. And
well, when you say open source, it's something like whatever you put on Facebook or yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that's what open source intelligence has come to mean, is basically your Facebook posts, you know, stuff like that. And you look at SAS Memex's promotional material for this type of open source intelligence gathering and collation equipment that they sell, and there isn't a lot out there about it. But one thing that I did gather is that the software is capable of gathering open source intelligence, which means your Facebook posts, and then I guess analyzing it. Basically, it figures out who your friends are, you know, who your relationships are between different people. Mm-hmm. It also does text mining, which I imagine would include keyword searches based on user-defined values. And it also maps...
Wait. User-defined... Explain what that means exactly.
So these systems, like the SAS Memex stuff, and also the OpenMind system that was also purchased with USDHS money, they both require an analyst to put in user-defined values, like I want you to search these websites, I want you to search for X, Y, and Z, you know, stuff like that. There's got to be somebody running the ship, you know, somebody at the helm. And
so the user-defined value, but what are they searching for? Like mentions of the word organize or protest or anything like that?
Well, unfortunately, I can't tell you exactly.
Right.
I mean, the information that I got, for example, on the SAS Memex system on what its capabilities are, it's just really limited the amount of information that's out there. I had to get some idea of what it did from like patent records.
So one thing they can do is they can apply what the government's ability to use is facial recognition technology, right?
Right.
And you say, according to this, that they draw from a state database of driver's license photos to photographs on Facebook to profile citizens believed to be associated with activist groups. So in other words, if I went down, as I did, to the Occupy site in New York City, and some government agent took a picture of me, not only my picture, but everybody on my Facebook page who has put a picture on there could be stored somewhere by the government as a potential threat.
Well, you know, the ACTIC facial recognition unit is run by MCSO, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. You know,
oh wow!
Of the famous Joe Arpaio. And so what I imagine is, even though Joe Arpaio is a great self-promoter, I would imagine that the NYPD intelligence unit has probably got just as much DHS funding, if not a lot more, than MCSO does. And MCSO actually apparently has mobile units that they can deploy to, quote, special events. And in the vernacular, special events a lot of times mean protest events. Mm-hmm. It can mean anything from a protest event to the Super Bowl when you say special events. So they have these mobile units for facial recognition technology. And like you said, they draw, I think it's shocking to a lot of people because people may imagine that, they'd be drawing from mugshot photos or,
yes, if you committed a crime, for instance.
Right. Stuff associated with criminal activity. But, probably, I think the single largest area of data they're drawing from is driver's license photos. So it is somewhat disconcerting because they're, based on the couple of instances that were in the records that I got, like this case where they were looking for this Amber girl who, the tip they got stated she was 20, but the photograph that was provided, she looked like a teenager to me. Mm-hmm. And, you've got these terrorism liaison, all hazards analysts analyzing her Facebook photo to try to figure out who she is just because some anonymous tipster wrote in and said that she was an Occupy nut and had said something disturbing in an online forum or something that this person thought was disturbing.
Is there any Senate or congressional oversight at all on this kind of out-of-control, unconstitutional spying?
I don't know. Not that I am aware of. I mean, speaking to like the Department of Justice's investigatory guidelines, it doesn't seem like anything that has been done that I've reported on is actually illegal.
What is now one thing you mentioned is that in your report here, and if you just tuned in, we're talking to Beau Hodai. I'm saying it right?
Yep.
And he's a freelance reporter and a contributor to the Center for Media and Democracy and publisher of DBA Press, and they have a whole new report on where they've distilled and listed all the different things that Department of Homeland Security and local police departments do to spy on you with your own money, by the way, that you paid in taxes. And these places are called fusion centers. And where do people go to get details of this report and to read your report?
You can go to any of the CMD websites. I guess the CMD websites that are carrying it are sourcewatch.org and prwatch.org. And then the report and the source materials archive containing most of the documents, or a lot of them at least discussed, are on DBA Press, which is dbapress.com.
dbapress.com, okay.
Yeah, and I'm still in the process of uploading a lot of documents. Unfortunately, a lot of them are in paper form, and I'm still scanning them.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah, so you mentioned another one of the things you mentioned in the report here, and I'm just reading a summary of your report, obviously, is you said private individuals and groups, such as, no surprise here, Charles Koch, and some others, have hired off-duty police officers. Sometimes they're still armed and in police uniforms to perform private security. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one thing that we got into with the report was this phenomenon of entities that are being protested, private entities hiring off-duty police officers to work as corporate security, basically, or private security. And in the cases that are discussed, or at least in most of the discussion in the report, I know for a fact that the officers in question were in uniform and armed.
But working for, at the moment, Chase Manhattan Bank or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
In Wichita, for example, records that we got from the Wichita Police Department show that Koch Industries, Charles Koch, and Chase Koch, Charles's son, all hired off-duty Wichita police officers to act as corporate security during Occupy Wichita's Occupy Kochtown event, which is just, it really is pretty ludicrous because if you look at what Occupy Kochtown was, there was some marching involved, but primarily it was educational sessions to educate people in the community about what the Koch brothers are doing, especially in the heart of Koch country, Wichita. And here they are hiring cops.
In New York City, they had a big program with that. They were paying, not only were they paying the cops, but they also had to pay, this is banks that hired them, they had to pay the New York City Police Department per cop per hour.
Right. It's similar to what, like in Arizona, for example. Well, actually, it's such a widespread practice. It seems every police department I approached on this has a office of, the names all vary, but like the Office of Off-Duty Employment, for example, where you contact the police department and say, "Hey, I'd like to order up, 20 cops."
Mm-hmm.
And some police departments allow the cops to go, not in uniform, plain clothes.
Right.
But you see, the majority of these request forms, of course, people want to buy cops in uniform who are armed. That's what they want. They don't want. They want the uniform. They don't want some guy acting as private security.
Well, a lot of, to be fair, on the other side is a lot of cops make nothing. They get paid. They get paid an embarrassingly low amount of money. So a lot of them have off-duty jobs, and why not that kind of job? But to have them appear in uniform with a badge and to have police arrest powers working for a private entity,
Right, because a uniform represents the power that we, the people, invest in our government. You're not supposed to be able to buy that,
mm-hmm.
and that's what they're doing. And I definitely agree. I mean, a lot of these officers, I dealt with some of them at a protest event, and they didn't particularly seem proud of what they were doing. But
mm-hmm.
You've got to, everybody's got to make their ends meet.
Oh yeah, and cops get paid a ridiculous amount of money. I don't even see how they could possibly support themselves. I mean, if they all got paid a lot more money in the first place, they wouldn't even need to do this. But that's all part of how it works,
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Another interesting thing about the uniform is that in Arizona, for example, there actually is a piece of case law that establishes that if an off-duty police officer, wearing the uniform, like we were discussing, is an important part of this hiring out process, engages in something that's wrong or illegal, they're doing so or acting under the color of law, or anything they do while wearing that uniform, even if they're off duty and being paid as private security, they're doing under the color of law. So quite literally, they are purchasing law enforcement officers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, they're purchasing the law is what they're purchasing.
Exactly right.
So what is here, you talk about the FBI. What is Operation Tripwire?
Yeah, Operation Tripwire was something that is discussed in the report apropos of the documents we got from the FBI through a FOIA request. And Operation Tripwire is something that was established in 2003 by the FBI as an initiative to, stop and apprehend domestic terrorists through the use of private sector informants. So, for example, like the idea behind it is, say you own a fertilizer retailer shop, and some mysterious guy with a nervous twitch comes in and buys an inordinately large amount of fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're part of the Operation Tripwire program, you contact up your FBI contact and tell them about this. And that's the idea. What we saw in the records is two instances where Tripwire was mentioned. One was a special agent's report. I think both of these may have been reports that came out of the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, although I'm not quite sure. But anyways, like I said, the records are on DBA Press. But anyways, these special agents, these two instances, in one instance we're talking about installing tripwires in an emerging North Central Florida Occupy group. I think it may have been Occupy Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm.
And the second was, I believe, Occupy Gainesville, where they were talking about contacting one of their tripwire informants who was working at the Oaks Mall and notifying them that there was an Occupy Gainesville protest planned at that mall and asking for them to report on any suspicious activity. And then you look at it, what the event in question was it was, maybe 10 Occupy Gainesville people who are known as the Occupy Gainesville radical cheerleaders who went to the mall and basically chanted, danced and sang is what they did. They got, these young...
Well, there's a real threat to America.
Right. Yeah. They were in the mall cafeteria dancing and singing about why they were doing what they were doing, about the corporate influence in American democracy and encouraging people to join them. while their friends passed out flyers encouraging people to join them. And then there's actually a YouTube video of this incident, which is really great because at the end, when the radical cheerleaders are done with their dance and song, some mall cops approach them and ask them for their names. Mm-hmm. And, it's very interesting in the context of these records because we know that prior to, the Occupy Gainesville radical cheerleaders doing their song and dance, these mall cops were contacted by the FBI and asked to gather information. But right there in the YouTube video, you can see, Operation Tripwire at work. These mall cops walk up to these kids and ask them for their names. The kids said, "Oh, well, do we have to?" And the mall cops said, "No." They said, "Oh, well, okay, I guess we won't, but thank you very much. And we're going now." And they were really polite young adults, and they were just looking to spread the word. And then they left.
I think they're a bunch of terrorists. That's what I think.
Right. Well, you can't have people singing and dancing willy-nilly, I guess.
No, it's terrifying. Literally, it's terrifying. I mean, obviously what's fucking terrifying, pardon my language, is that they're doing this. In other words, the government is spending billions of dollars of our tax money to spy on us. And a lot of people are making a lot of money off this. Like, for instance, this company you were mentioning that has these, these technology systems. Somebody's making a lot of money, right? But it's certainly not us. And so they're using billions of dollars to do this. Meanwhile, they're squawking and screaming about how there's not enough money, so we have to cut Social Security.
Well, something about it that really irritates me is because, most of the discussion in basically the Arizona narrative in the report is the skeleton on which the national instances are framed. Mm-hmm. So the main narrative is the Arizona thing, and so that's what I spent most of my time on in the report. And so I was looking at these Arizona Department of Homeland Security records detailing U.S. Homeland Security funding of this stuff like the data mining programs to monitor your Facebook page. And it really irritated me because in the part of the state where I live, a lot of school districts can't even afford to keep their schools open 5 days a week. And, they're getting U.S. Department of Education assistance, but, it just seems like the federal Homeland Security assistance for this ludicrous stuff is far outstripping the actual needs of the community. I mean, what kind of place do we live in where we can finance data mining programs that, like in the case of the Phoenix program, $600,000 for this software.
But they can't keep the schools open 5 days a week.
Right.
Well, obviously what the plan is there is to make people stupider so that they don't question what they're doing.
Well, it's really unfortunate. It's a simple fact. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have a functioning democracy if the people are ignorant.
Well, that's exactly what's happening, though. I mean, they're laying off teachers all over the place. They're closing schools. They're selling off schools. In Chicago, just the other day, they had a final hearing, which didn't make any difference at all. And they're going to close 50 schools there because they can't afford them. But they can afford billions of dollars at a fusion center somewhere, hundreds of millions in Chicago or New York, where they're also laying off teachers and closing schools. But they can't educate people, but they can spy on them.
Right. And so we got all these revenue streams, both state and federal, that are going to that stuff, and they're not going to bail out the schools. It's just...
Well, so here we are with all this information, which is sadly not so shocking. I mean, even though it should be at this point, or maybe sometimes it continues to be, but it's sort of in receding amounts. You get numb to it after a while. So what do you recommend that anybody could possibly do about a thing like this?
Well, the thing that I think would be best on several levels is for people in whatever cities or towns you live in to start submitting records requests to local agencies that are involved in fusion centers. And I mean, of course, you can still write your congressman and your state representatives.
You're laughing, and you're laughing, but I laugh too when I hear that kind of phrase these days. I mean, hasn't everybody written them a million times?
Right. Well, in like with the case of the ALEC thing, where these cops who were paid to $35 an hour off duty to work as security for the ALEC conference, that consists largely of our lawmakers and then the corporate representatives who are writing our laws. We've got a letter in these records where one of the lawmakers at the Congress wrote the cops and thanked them for what they did. And what the cops did was they quite literally attacked these protesters and arrested at least 5 of them after, on trespassing and crossing a police line after dragging them onto the resort property. And those arrests, by the way, were actually ordered according to PPD records by Sergeant Eric Harkins, who is off-duty working as private security at the time he ordered those arrests. And then, we have this lawmaker writing them and saying, thank you for the great job in protecting us while we...
All right, so say it again now. I mean, assuming that you want to write to a congressperson, it's your right to... I mean, if you had nothing better to do, but what could we really do about it?
Right. What you really do is start submitting public records requests.
But but people are afraid to do that.
Well, I think we need to really stop being afraid, because if we live in a state of fear, it's just going to get worse. I don't.
If people check your website, is there a way they can learn how to submit these requests?
I actually have a tutorial that I've been working on to publish on the website. There are several tutorials on there. It's not on there now, but if anybody needs help, they can contact me through the website. The contact information is on the website. And until I get the tutorial out there, I'd be glad to help anybody that feels they need help submitting requests or figuring out where to submit their requests.
So if people want to do that, they can contact you. So, I mean, if they go to your website, there's a contact place?
Yeah. It's the website is dbapress.com, and the email address for the contact is just publisher@dbapress.com. Okay. Now, see, personally, I don't have to worry about being spied on because they can tune in every week and hear exactly what I'm saying. So I have a kind of weird immunity, and I also don't want to request my FBI file because we need the room in the house. I don't want it to be. We don't have room for that. Sure, you don't need that kind of clutter.
Yeah, that's true. It would probably take up about 5, square yards. So, anything else you wanted to tell us here about what's going on? I mean, the report is extraordinary, and I congratulate you on your bravery in confronting these people, especially out there where you're doing it with Sheriff Joe and all those people.
Well, thanks. That's really what I encourage is. Here's the thing. I mean, if we are living in a time when people are afraid to even inquire as to what is going on, especially with our own tax dollars and with these people work for us. They do not tell us what to do. It's a democracy, or at least it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. If we live in a time where people are afraid to make inquiries, and it's gone too far, and people need to just put them on notice. Say, look, basically think of it as you're auditing your local government. Mm-hmm. They work for you. You have every right to audit them. And then also by filing these requests, not only are you going to gain information into what they're doing, but you are also going to put them on notice that, the public does care, and the public is not so afraid that it is not going to audit them.
Okay, so give the website one more time, and then we're going to have to take a break and move on. See if we can get some calls here on this subject after you have gone back to compiling more information, which is, I'm sure, what you're doing. So what's the website again?
The website is DBA Press. This is where the archives are, and that's where I can be contacted. It's dbapress.com. Mm-hmm. And then the report, as well as we broke out several articles from the large report, because the report's 88 pages long. And we understand people work 40, 60, 70 hours a week, and they may not have time to read all that. So we broke out several articles from the report, which are available also through CMD's website, PR Watch, which is prwatch.org.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Listen, thanks a lot for doing this, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sure, absolutely. All right, we are going to go to a break here, and when we come back, if anybody wants to call up about this, feel free. You go on Facebook, you send emails, you say use certain words in there. You could say that you're appalled at the terrorism committed by these evil Muslims. You could be totally right wing. They're going to nail you. In other words, they're looking for words that you use. You could say, I went to a protest at the local supermarket because they raised their prices. They'll see the word protest and put you on a list. They use facial recognition. They pull all this stuff off Facebook. I mean, good luck to us all, right? This is what they're doing with our tax money to the tune of billions, probably tens of billions of dollars. And At the same time, we're hearing arguments between, the two parties about how much they're going to cut old people's Social Security or Medicare, or right now they have a sequester where Meals on Wheels has been cut in many places, so that people are actually probably on the verge of starvation, where they've cut medical care. But they can easily afford to spy on us. This is what it's gotten to. And believe me, it's the Democrats and it's the Republicans. It's the Democrats and the Republicans. Two sides of the same rotten coin. Let's go to a break and then we'll come back. If you got anything you want to say about this, call us up and we'll put you right on after the break.
Mark Thompson on Sirius XM Left. Mark Thompson.
We can stop terrorism, but we're helpless against the NRA. Stop Al Qaeda, but we can't stop the NRA. You could get Osama bin Laden, but you can't stop the NRA. I'm going to tweet that. That's heavy. We can stop Al Qaeda, but we can't stop the NRA. Look at that. That is a profound statement. That's the thought for the day, you all.
Make it plain with Mark Thompson. Weekdays at 6 p.m. East, 3 West. On Sirius XM Left, 127.
We'd like to introduce you to you. Not the you that likes baseball or spaghetti. The you that's inside of you. Who are we? 23andMe. Named after the 23 chromosome pairs that make up your DNA, 23andMe.com provides valuable information that might impact your everyday health. Visit 23andMe.com to order your DNA kit today for only $99.
23andMe services are for informational use only. They are not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Hi, Joe. This is Bob, your banker. I'm sorry, but your business loan has been declined.
That's okay, Bob. Anchor Funding Services already funded my business.
But you have no capital in your business, and you're growing very quickly.
Exactly. Anchor Funding Services gave me immediate cash for my accounts receivable.
Oh, I can send Anchor Funding Services a lot of business. What's their number?
877-70-ANCHOR. That's 877-70-ANCHOR. 877-70-ANCHOR. Or you can go to 70anchor.com. That's 70anchor.com.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of the world's most comfortable pillow, My Pillow. We all have the same problem sleeping at night. Our pillows go flat. We end up folding our pillows over for support, using our arms, flip-flopping all night long like a guppy. We wake up in the morning, we have sore necks, we have headaches, our arms are asleep, we feel like we need a nap in the afternoon even though we've slept 8 hours. Well, with my patented fill, wherever you move this pillow, it'll hold the exact position for you as an individual, and you'll get the best night's sleep of your life. Also, it stays cool. You don't have to flip it to the cool side. It stays healthy for a full 10 years, and it's warranted not to go flat. And you can throw it right in the washer and dryer just like your favorite blue jeans, and I personally guarantee it's going to be the most comfortable pillow you'll ever own.
Log on to mypillow.com now or call 1-800-299-6896 to get fitted for your very own MyPillow. Enter promo code XM11 and save 25% off your entire order when you call or log on today.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com.
Sirius XM celebrates the sounds of summer with Bob Hope Radio.
His USO shows.
This is Bob, just back from overseas Hope. I was over enemy territory with an English flyer, and I said, why don't you look through the bomb sight? And he said, we can't. We're boiling tea in it.
The plane I was on had 2 decks. I lost $17 on the trip.
A salute to our troops.
Well, here we are at Edwards Air Force Base at Muroc, the paradise of the West, where never is heard a discouraging word and everybody has applied for a transfer.
Bob Hope Radio, all Memorial Day weekend on Sirius XM 98.
Sirius XM Left 127, Our Defenders.
You're keeping our country safe. Everything that we have is due to your efforts, so thank you for your sacrifices.
Sirius XM Left 127.
Okay, we're back. This is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Left 127. Do we have somebody on the line? Kendall, you're on, Kendall. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I think we agree on something here. I totally agree with you that the Democrats and the Republicans are both two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, go ahead.
But that's kind of why the Second Amendment supporters are so against any form of gun registration.
Oh, God.
I have no doubt that they'd use it.
Oh, God in heaven and all of his children. Go ahead, Kendall. Sorry.
That was my point.
That's your point, huh? Okay, thanks a lot, Kendall. Bang, bang, you're dead. Okay, guns, guns, guns. Girls, girls, girls. Live girls. Step right in, ladies and gentlemen. And guns, too. Guns, girls, and God. We got them right here. God bless America. You know, we are fucking doomed. Unbelievable. Because straight from all of that, so that's why we need guns. So presumably, if we all have bazookas, machine guns, and personal drone strike missiles will be safe from the federal government. That's good. That's good. Every single day now, and I'm not exaggerating, there is a report on the internet or in a local paper or in a national paper where some child, usually of a person who lives down south or out west, a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old, has picked up their father's gun and either killed themselves with it or another friend or their own sister or their own mother. Every single day. And these lunatics, these morons, these people who really, basically psychologically, mostly men, feel terribly inadequate about the size of whatever personal equipment they have, and I'm not talking about automatic weapons, have to have these huge, long guns that shoot things off. Something is not huge, not long, and it is not shooting itself off with these guys. So they got to get guns to do it for them. And that's what it's all about. If I never hear another word about guns in my entire life, I will be, no, I can't say that. I can't say I will be a happy man because it's just a lie. But I would be very satisfied never to hear another word about guns. Jesus Christ. Well, listen, you know what? That's all for this hour. We'll be back. Let's get up. We have Napoleon up there? Get Napoleon up there. Thank you very much. We'll be back after 7 o'clock. Be back after the 7 o'clock.
Remember when you ran away and I got on my knees and begged you not to leave because I'd go berserk? Well, you left me anyhow, and then the days got worse and worse, and now you see I've gone completely out of my mind. And they're coming to take me away, ha-ha, they're coming to take me away, ho-ho, hee-hee, ha-ha, to the funny farm where life is beautiful all the time, and I'll be happy to see those nice young men in their clean white coats, and they're coming to take me away, ha-ha!
Gather round me, everybody, gather round me while I preach some, feel a sermon coming on me. The topic will be sin, and that's what I'm again. If you wanna hear my story, then settle back and just sit tight while I start reviewing the attitude of doing right. You got to accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, and latch on to the affirmative. Don't mess with Mr. In Between.
Come and take me away.
You got to spread joy.
Up to the maximum.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo in so much space. And when you're out there without care, yeah, I was out of touch. But it wasn't because I didn't know enough. I just knew too much. Does that make me
the memory of those who've gone before and saluting those who serve today. Memorial Day with SiriusXM and the IAVA.
My name is Derek Coy. I'm a former Marine, and I served 2 tours in Iraq. I joined the Marine Corps in 2004 to follow in my father's footsteps, as well as to serve my country. The main issue that I care about is definitely the VA backlog. I think it's just unacceptable to have nearly 900,000 veterans waiting to get the care that they need, earned, and deserve. Yeah, so when I got out of the service, I was used to having my brothers and sisters on my side, and we knew we were in the fight together. And when I came home, it was a completely different story. I felt alone. I felt by myself. But what it did for me was just open my eyes to realize that I could be part of something bigger. And it wasn't until I was able to become a member of IAVA that I knew that there was people out there that still had my back.
Supporting today's veterans and honoring the sacrifice of those no longer with us. Have a happy and safe Memorial Day weekend.
Hi friends, I'm Louis Palafudis, president of Morgan Gold. Do you ever wish you could print your own money? Well, guess what? That's exactly what the U.S. government is doing. The Federal Reserve announced it will print over $1 trillion out of thin air this year, watering down the U.S. dollar even more. This is putting your retirement at risk. Right now, your 401k and IRA are in a bubble. Well, friends, we at Morgan Gold have a retirement solution. I've put together the most qualified team in the industry to help save your investments.
Morgan Gold's team of experts includes Ed Moy, who served in both Bush administrations, created Homeland Security, was the last director of the United States Mint, and is the current go-to gold expert for all the major news organizations. No other investment firm can say this.
Protect your retirement the way I did by adding gold to your IRA or 401k.
Call Morgan Gold now for your free consultation and investor's guide. 800-255-7400 or visit morgangold.com. Call 800-255-7400. That's 800-255-7400.
Wouldn't it be great if you could get everything you needed for your small business for free? Like a building for free, a company car for free, your business website built for free? The cost to have your website professionally built can be thousands of dollars. But for a limited time, the experts at web.com will build your website on one of the domains that define the internet, .com and .net, powered by VeriSign, absolutely free. And that's not all. Web.com will promote your new website in all the major search engines, like Google, Yahoo, and Bing. If after 30 days you're happy with your new website, we'll continue to provide promotion, hosting, support, and maintenance, all for just one low monthly fee. If not, cancel and pay nothing. Call now to get your new site up and running in as little as 7 days, free. Call 1-855-730-SITE. That's 1-855-730-SITE. 1-855-730-7483. Or go to web.com/radio.
Sirius XM Left 127, honoring our veterans.
Thank you so much for your time, your effort, and your sacrifices.
Sirius XM Left 127.
AP Radio News. I'm Diane Kepley. At least one woman is dead and another person is missing following heavy rains in San Antonio. The woman who drowned was swept away after being trapped in her car. Fire Chief Charles Hood says rescue crews have responded to dozens of calls of drivers just like her.
We had fire crews responding to another water-related rescue. They happened to see this vehicle go into the water. They stopped. If they wouldn't have stopped and tried to rescue her, give her her only chance of survival, no one would have even known that she had gone in the water.
The flooding has been caused by record rainfall.
Initial look at it looks like it's in the top 3 as far as a 24-hour rainfall in the San Antonio area. It might even end up being the most rainfall ever received in a 24-hour period.
And that's Brian Hoth with the National Weather Service. In Moore, Oklahoma, a sign of life slowly returning to some sense of normalcy. High school graduation ceremonies were held today, and Senator Jim Inhofe says the people of his state will continue to work together to recover from this week's devastating tornado.
Oklahoma will persevere and overcome this tragedy as we have demonstrated in the past.
President Obama plans to tour the area tomorrow. The next generation of Army officers is being told it's up to them to halt sex abuse within the ranks. Defense Secretary Hagel delivered a commencement address at West Point.
Speaking to cadets at West Point's commencement, Hagel said sex crimes are not the only threat to the force, but also alcohol and drug abuse, suicide, and mental illness.
You will need to not just deal with these debilitating, insidious, and destructive forces, but rather, you must be the generation of leaders that stop it.
He called sex harassment and abuse a scourge that must be stamped out. Sagar Meghani at the Pentagon.
In France, a soldier was stabbed in the neck in an attack outside of Paris. The attacker escaped. This is AP Radio News. A search continues in Iowa for a teenager who was kidnapped Monday. Another girl escaped, and the man who kidnapped them committed suicide just hours after she got free. Divers are searching for the pilot of a volunteer Angel flight plane that went down in upstate New York late Friday.
The bulk of the plane was found submerged in a large pond, while other parts were scattered in nearby woods. The Federal Aviation Administration says the plane departed from Bedford, Massachusetts, and was headed to Rome, New York, when it crashed in Ephrata, west of Albany.
AP's Julie Walker tells us 2 passengers on board were killed in the crash. Demonstrations have been held in the U.S. and in over 50 other countries to protest Monsanto. Organizers say they wanted to call attention to dangers posed by genetically modified food and the companies that produce it. Former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords has told graduates at Bard College in New York they can change the world. She told the graduates the country is counting on them to create, lead, and innovate. I'm Diane Kepley, AP Radio News.
Okay, we're back. So did you ever find that? You didn't find that piece? No, not there? Okay, so we're looking for a certain song. And by the way, if any of you enjoy these song mixes, it's not me. I will suggest a song here and there, but the genius behind this is our engineer here, who comes up with these mixes, who picks songs out of that he finds that he likes, or some of the songs I have up there for years on this board that I have where you can choose songs from, and he mixes them. And it's a tricky thing to do because for reasons that it's difficult to get into on the air here, Sirius only allows 29-second clips of songs to be played. We can't play whole songs here anymore. We could several years ago, but then something changed, and we're only allowed to play 29-second clips of songs. And so he has to pick these out and then mix them together. So this is when, so sometimes you hear these mixes. Some of you have written to me that you think they're funny or interesting or inspiring. So that's where they come from. Well, once again, I should say that if you are just tuning in, or if you have not heard before, and it's my responsibility to do this to myself, I have a new book out, a brand new book out by myself. And those of you who've been listening to me for decades on other stations and on this station, and new listeners on this station, will want to get this. The book is called A Long Swim Upstream. A Long Swim Upstream. And it's a collection of autobiographical short stories. I guarantee you it's good reading. Believe me, I know. From the responses I've gotten from a lot of people, and because I've read a couple of thousand books myself, and I know a good one when I see one. So it's called A Long Swim Upstream. If you want to get this book, let's say, first thing you want to do is, let me take a look. It's the first story and a half of this collection of stories is available for free for you to read online. If you go to Amazon and put in a search for books, A Long Swim Upstream, you get, you see the book cover, which is a really terrific book cover. And then you can go to a portion on the screen on the right, and it'll allow you to read the first story to get an idea what the writing is like and what the stories are like. And then you can order the book, which you ought to do. And you can go to Amazon to do this. You can also get it in paperback. If you want to read it in paperback, you don't have an ebook reader. And there's other places, too, where you can get it. You can get it on Barnes & Noble Nook e-readers. To those of you who have these separate things, you know what I'm talking about. There's a place called Kobo, which makes the book available in other countries fairly widely, and another thing called Smashwords. And soon, and I will let you know about this next week if it happens, in the next couple of days, hopefully it'll be up on Apple, that is iTunes, and something called an iBookstore, so you can read it on iPads. I am telling you this. So it's called A Long Swim Upstream. Stories by Mike Fader. All right, so lots of things going on these days. I see the president made a speech to the National Defense University the other day, whatever the hell that is. The National Defense University? What is that? I know what West Point is. I know what Annapolis is. I know what the Air Force Academy is, but the National Defense University? Maybe I don't even want to know what that is. Anyhow, the president made a speech there and came out with the shattering news that he's going to close Guantanamo. President Obama, who's been running on closing Guantanamo since 2003, which is about 10 years now. Is that right? 10 years now. Got elected on the fact that he was going to close Guantanamo, and it's still there. One of the great disgraces in American history, a sin and a shame and a stain on America, internally and externally. The whole world looks at us and says we're hypocrites, we're torturers, and we treat anybody who's not the same white color as most people in this country who run the country like criminals and do anything we want to them. So this is, I'm sorry. So this is what this is what they get. So the guy makes a speech, and he's gonna get tough on Guantanamo. He says Guantanamo is a national disgrace. That's a national disgrace. This is hard to even compute in a regular person's brain. Let me explain something about neurochemistry, as much as I understand it. Right? I didn't study it in school. I only play a neurochemist on the radio. Right? Neurochemistry in the human brain, and this is something everybody understands anyhow, right? You don't have to study science to know this. In the human brain strives towards harmony. In other words, if you hear something that's unharmonious, which is dissonance, which has dissonance, a lot of modern music has dissonance. That is, deliberately composers, usually of classical music, will put together chords that sounds, it's like eating something sour, right? And it sounds wrong. In other words, most people want to hear a musical phrase or a chord resolved into something which is harmonious or melodic at the end. Just the same way that people like to hear. Now, it's not always the case, obviously. This is not reality always. But people like to hear or feel better hearing happy endings to things. Or if you just think of in your own life, if you have an argument with somebody, or if you're feeling very upset about something, you naturally want to resolve the argument so that you don't live in a state of perpetual anxiety or anger. Anything which is discordant or upsetting or disrupting or sounds to your or communicated to your five senses, which is disturbing in any way, your brain naturally wants to make it better, to resolve it. So it's the same thing with the perception of ideas and concepts. If you know something to be true, you know it for a fact, right? It's right in your face. You know it. Everybody knows it. It's really that way. And then someone in a position of authority, or someone like who is a celebrity or who's famous, or who's a chief executive of a corporation, or who's the president of the United States, for instance, stands up and tells you that what you absolutely know to be true is not true, or says something which is in direct contradiction, or says something in direct contradiction to what he's actually doing. So for the last, whatever it is, 8+ years, almost 9 years, for the last, let's say 9 years or 8 years, however long he's been in power, Obama, and could have worked to close Guantanamo, he hasn't done one damn thing. Not one damn thing. He ran, he got elected on this, and he has not done anything about it. And he is making a speech saying it's a national disgrace. If he says that this place is a national disgrace, which it is, it's an international disgrace on the United States and on human rights for everyone, he is the disgrace, because he's you're listening to me now, right? Me, I can't pick up the phone. Here's a phone in the studio right here. I could reach over to this phone, if actually I could reach across where the engineer put the phone because he doesn't want me to touch it. I could reach over to the phone and I could dial up the Department of Justice. If I could dial up Eric Holder right now from this phone and say, Eric, this is the president. I want you to go into the office right now. I don't care if it's Saturday night. I don't care, Eric, and he says, okay, Mr. President. He said, you go over to the Justice Department right now, wake everybody, get them over there. I want them working all night before. I don't want anybody going to sleep until morning, till it's done. Type out 86 waivers, special waivers, which the Congress has allowed and the Department of Justice and the Defense Department has agreed to, that guarantee that 86 of the detainees in Guantanamo prison right now, who have been locked up for 10 years, some of them since they're teenagers, scooped off the quote-unquote battlefield as quote-unquote terrorists by the CIA or the Defense Department, some of them turned in for reward money, dozens and dozens of people who have been rotting in this place with no protections and no laws and hardly any law at all to defend them. These people who have never committed a crime, have never been proven guilty of a crime because they're never allowed to go to court. And even the Justice Department and military tribunals appointed here have investigated their background and found out that they did nothing more than maybe were seen in the vicinity of somebody who was supposed to be a terrorist. Or maybe they were walking out of a house, and they were later on that house was occupied by American troops, and they discovered arms in there just because he was seen walking out of it by a Predator drone surveillance camera. He is arrested as a terrorist. Also, when we went into Afghanistan, the United States offered a $5,000 reward. Now listen to this: a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of a terrorist. In other words, if you turned in a terrorist, quote unquote, to the American military authorities or to the local CIA operatives, you got $5,000. $5,000 in Afghanistan is somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 in this country. For some people, it's a life's wages in Afghanistan. Now, you imagine what you're going to get from people over there who have no, interest or respect for the United States of America, and why should they? Of course, $5,000. If you don't like somebody who lives down the block because he insulted you once, or you want to have his girlfriend or something like that because you've always been attracted to her, turn the man in. You get $5,000. You're a rich man in Afghanistan, and the guy never did a damn thing wrong. A lot of people were turned into the United States government for the $5,000 just because somebody had a grudge against them. There was never any real evidence that they committed a crime. The U.S. scoops them up because they need terrorists to show the world and to show the voters of the United States that all of this bullshit for the last 10 years and all this $1 trillion is not for nothing. So they scoop these people up. Some of them were 15, 16 years old. They picked these kids up. Some of them, maybe what they do is they picked up, they picked up a radio once, and they communicated the position of an American group to somebody else. So for that, they put them in jail for 10 years. Don't put them on trial. Well, you all know this story, right? So these people have been in there for the last 10 years. Some of them even longer, maybe however long in Afghanistan. It could be 12 years. Some of them arrested as teenagers. They never get to see their families. They're, 10,000 miles away from where they were born and from any place they ever knew. They're sitting in cages like they would put animals in down there. They are tortured very often. They have been tortured. They don't have access to lawyers. They don't get evidence presented. They have military tribunals. They have no access to the decent, same laws and courts that any murderer or rapist in the United States would have access to. They don't have any of this. If they're religious, their books are spit on by the guards. These people are kicked. They're herded. They're shackled together hand and feet when they're already in cages inside of a United States Marine base. This is all to humiliate them and treat them like shit. And where they get these guards from and how they could possibly live themselves if they're human beings is beyond my comprehension. Now, 86 of these people down there, for many, many years now, going on 6, 7, 8 years, have already been cleared by the United States military and the Justice Department and even the fucking CIA that these people have not committed any crimes at all. They present no danger whatsoever to the United States of America if they ever did. They are innocent people as far as even the government is concerned. And yet the president has not set them free. They have no access to courts. There's no habeas corpus. They don't have shit. And the president, all he has to do, because this has been done in federal court in the 1st District in Washington, 1st District Federal Court in Washington, all they need is for the Justice Department to type out a waiver, a special waiver, saying that this particular detainee presents no threat, which they already know they don't. Walk over to the court, you file it with the court, and the judge issues a release order. That's all it takes. The president has a phone in his pocket, or his aide is carrying a phone. He's probably got a phone on his desk. All he has to do is pick it up, call Eric Holder and say, I want you working all night, Monday morning. You present these 86 waivers. These people will go home. and he has never done it, and he's still not doing it. The man stands up in front of the National Defense University, God knows who they are, and says to them so that the whole world hears it, that this is a disgrace, this place. But he doesn't do one damn thing, nor has he ever done one damn thing to close it. What kind of person is he? What does this make him? What does this make him? If you had the ability to pick up a phone right now and call the Attorney General and release these people, you'd do it. If I had the ability, I'd do it right now. If I was the president, I'd reach over right now to this phone right here, punch in the number, and tell him to do his job and let these people go. Just because it's the right thing to do, let alone how it looks, right? That we actually have even a spark of democracy left in this country and respect for humanity. But he doesn't do it. So he stands up there and says it's a disgrace, doesn't do anything about it. It makes your brain reel. That's what I was talking about earlier. It's this sense of, it's called cognitive dissonance. You know this phrase, cognitive dissonance, right? Cognition, what your brain recognizes. And there's a dissonance. In other words, it's not sonorous. It's not harmonious. It's not, you're under arrest. I think you're a terrorist. You're trying to subvert my radio show. So, it's dissonance. In other words, what happens is it's a contradiction in your mind and in your heart. The president has kept these people for locked up, and he has the power to free them for 8 years now as president. They are tortured. They have no rights to an attorney. They don't get to court. They are already, and he knows this, they're already declared innocent by his own government, and he doesn't do anything about it. Then he stands up and says it's a disgrace, and he's going to close the place down, which he's been saying, how is it at the 150th time he said it since he started running for office in 2003 or whatever it was? What are you supposed to make of this? What happens is your brain starts to sort of turn upside down. You say, I don't get it. He said he's going to close it. Now you get a thing like the New York Times and other places, or MSNBC, which is essentially, Democratic Party television. They'll say, the president has been forthright. He is doing the right thing. He's been forthright saying, like the Times said, President says that Guantanamo is a national disgrace and that he will work on closing it down. No, it didn't say that even. This is even more to the point. The president calls Guantanamo a national disgrace and will close it down. No. When I worked in the probation department, and even when I worked in the welfare department in New York City, then any lawyer knows this. You don't say that somebody's going to do something. You say they said they're going to do it, because you don't know if they're going to do it. The assumption is that it'll be done when it gets done, that you don't believe it until it gets done. So we used to go back and we used to say, the defendant said, or the client said. This is what everybody says. And in court, they say alleges, right? Alleges. Like, for instance, if you're a defense attorney and the prosecution says somebody did something and you say they're innocent, you say the prosecution, alleges that my client, by now, this guy lies so much, or he's so crazy, he lives in his own world. It's incumbent upon news organizations to say, the president says he's going to do this, or the president claims he's going to do that. It's not sarcasm. It's just the truth. This guy is a serial liar. He's a hypocrite. He's a liar. He may be actually a little bit off his rocker. Does he actually believe that he's going to close the place down? Then why didn't he? I can't do it. You can't do it. He could do it. He could do it. It's not so hard. He's the commander in chief. It's a military base, and he could certainly release these 86 people, but he doesn't do it. So he calls it a disgrace. So your brain starts to reel. It's called cognitive dissonance, which means various things. But one of the main things it means is that something is true, or you observe something is true, or your five senses tell you it's true. But then someone tells you or attempts to show you that what you know for real is true is not true. And your brain starts doing backflips and says, whoa, somebody resolved this for me. Well, let me tell you what the resolution is. Facts are facts. When people are killing and raping and polluting and stealing from us, that's what they're doing. Whatever else they call it or whatever else they say they're going to do about it is bullshit. what's really happening here, I'm helping you with your cognitive dissonance. The reality is the reality. For instance, in the New York Times, I refer to the New York Times all the time because it's my hometown paper and, a lot of people read it. Every day or every other day, there's a gigantic ad, a color half-page ad in the New York Times, which must cost, I don't know, a couple of $100,000, which is pocket change, to some people. Anyhow, there's this huge ad, and here's a typical ad, and let me describe it to you. There's this big picture. Let me show Mr. Engineer. You take a picture? You see this? Okay. Big picture. A big photograph, reproduction of a photograph. It's huge, of this very, very attractive, young, touching, appealing-looking young African woman, and she's a mother, and she's holding in her arms this really lovable-looking child, presumably her child, of course, who's about 3 years old. Very touching scene, mother and son, right? And on the right, it says in huge letters, oil companies should support the communities they're a part of. And it says, we agree. And who is agreeing here? The Chevron Corporation. The Chevron Corporation. The Chevron Corporation is one of the main, if not the main, oil companies exploiting the offshore water drilling and some of the shore and land drilling for oil in Nigeria for the last 30 years. Nigeria has one of the worst military dictatorships on the face of the earth. They have murdered tens of thousands of their own people. Their military is infamous. There's no law there except whoever the current dictator is there. And these dictators in Nigeria are also notoriously corrupt. The Chevron Corporation, 80% of the money to support the military in Nigeria and something like more than 60% of the money to support various military dictatorships in this country who are world-renowned for their cruelty and their murder. This money comes straight from the Chevron Corporation, either royalties paid to these governments directly. Of course, the people never see a cent of this. Paid directly to the generals in charge of the Army and to the admirals in charge of their Navy, which patrols the coast, protecting these drill sites, and directly to the people who are in the ruling junta or the military dictators. It's paid directly by Chevron. It's called royalty money to the Nigerian government. It basically is just bribes. And, it goes straight into Swiss bank accounts. Now, when local people whose, for the last 30 years, whose streams, whose coastal waters, and whose land has been polluted to the point where it's impossible to use anymore by the Chevron Corporation, when all of their animals have died from this pollution, when nothing can grow there, when their children are getting sick and dying from various diseases, when they can't even put out in small boats because the Nigerian Navy will shoot them down and sink their boats because they're getting too near a drilling platform. When they raise up their voices in protest, the people who live in these villages there, these African people, the Nigerian military comes and either locks them up, puts them in jail, hangs them with no trial, or shoots them where they stand. And who pays for this? The Chevron Corporation. The Chevron Corporation even goes so far. It's not bad enough they give the money to the army through the military dictatorship to go and suppress these legitimate protests from people who are being killed by Chevron and their land polluted. They actually hire, during one protest, this was pointed out in Democracy Now! A couple of years ago, during one protest by one village, a couple of villagers from one village of 400 families, where they destroyed the whole place, Chevron, and polluted everything in sight, and every animal they had died, so they were starving to death. When two of these people presumed to set up a protest and try to paddle a boat out near a drill rig, the Chevron Corporation went and hired members of the Nigerian military. Talk about hiring off-duty cops. They hired, a couple of squads of naval patrol boats who patrol these areas to go there, and they shot them down in cold blood. Meanwhile, they are spending $200,000 for an ad featuring this very touching young mother and her son, saying that oil companies should support the communities they're part of. Now, this is the kind of thing, when I'm talking about cognitive dissonance, it makes your brain turn upside down, and it makes you feel as if everything is unreal. When the president says this about Guantanamo, you feel like you're Alice and you're in Wonderland. What world is this that he can say this but not do anything about it? What world do we live in when Chevron gets on TV over and over again, or British Petroleum, or some other global polluter gets on TV and says that their main interest is human beings and protecting people's liberty and happiness and the land and the waters that they thrive on? It makes you nuts. And what you have to keep remembering with all this stuff all the time is you have to keep remembering what's real. You have to stick with what's real. Otherwise, you'll be lost. They bombard you with this shit. Politicians make speeches. Corporations buy billions of dollars worth of ads, and they hire the most talented advertising agencies and graphic designers and script writers to do these shows. The Army now, by the way, the United States Army, which has the Defense Department, I should say, the military service, the Defense Department has an office of advertising, right? Now, you thought that the United States military was to defend us against our enemies if we're under attack. No. The United States military, and so, well, yeah, actually, that's what it's supposed to be for, right? So you say, well, that's nothing wrong with that. If you're a patriot, you would want to support the military to defend us against all of our enemies. And yet the United States military has a huge department of advertising. Now, why do they need to advertise in the military to get people to join the military? Why would they need to do that if they're doing their patriotic duty, defending all of us? You would think that people would flock to join them, right? To learn a trade, join the Army and rape the world. Oh, excuse me, join the Navy and see the world. Somehow I make that mistake. Join the Army and bomb the world. No, that's not right. Anyhow, but they have an advertising department. Now, the advertising department, not content with showing you these insanely crazy ads, like there's one on TV, maybe you've all seen it, for the Navy, the United States Navy, I don't know what it is, protecting American values wherever it goes. Absolutely. Well, absolutely. Like Guantanamo was United States naval base in another country. Imagine if China or Russia had a naval base that was part of California or New York. How would we like that? Cuba has to put up with this United States naval base in its own country. So, but, it's not enough that they have all these, these ads. And you see all these ads now. They look like video games now. They have all like, Army strong. If you can't hack it, you can't be a Marine. And they show you, all these guys in their dress blues or dress grays or whatever it is. And you see people jumping out of helicopters, special ops troops. They're lean, they're strong. There's men, there's women. And they've got dedicated looks in their faces. And behind them, flags are waving. And this is supposed to excuse all the incredible brutality, bullshit, raping, killing, suicide, invading of other countries. We watch this and we're supposed to be carried away. It's Memorial Day coming up. Memorial Day is coming up. This same crazy, lying president gets up and makes speeches about we're honoring the fallen, our brave men and women who serve overseas in the cause of democracy. Really? Really? Who believes that anymore? Who is over the age of 12, who isn't actually, who's not retarded? Who believes this anymore? And they keep saying it and saying it. Now, either you swallow it because you hear it all the time and you're supposed to believe it, or you know better. Memorial Day is coming up. Why did all those men die at Bunker Hill fighting the British? Why did men die at Gettysburg fighting to free slaves, fighting to keep the Union together? Why did men die on the beach at Normandy fighting the Nazis? All of these people, why did they die? Did they die so we could have Guantanamo, where we torture people and don't give them the rights of law? Is that why they died? What are we remembering on Memorial Day? Who are we honoring, and why are we doing it? I don't really know anymore. I'm going to take a break now. If you want to come back and talk about this, feel free. It's 866-997-4748. I have even the worst example, the biggest example of cognitive dissonance yet I have this to read you here, but if you wanted to comment on this, I'd be happy to hear it. 866-997-4748. Call during the commercial. The first 100 people who call get absolutely nothing.
The Agenda. Making headlines.
This has been nothing but a witch hunt from the beginning. There is a need to find what happened in Benghazi. There is a need for Congress to do adequate oversight to make sure the 29 recommendations that Admiral Mullen and Ambassador Pickering made are followed. That is an absolute necessity. That is where Congress should be spending its time.
The Agenda. With Ari Ravenhoft of Media Matters. Weeknights, 9 East, 6 West on Sirius XM Left, 127.
Guess what limits Kristen's golf game? She worries too much when obstacles are present.
Tom gets down on himself after missing an easy putt. He's slow to regain confidence.
These amateur golfers could use help with their mental game. Now they can do what elite athletes in Europe do. Go to iaimtowin.com, take the Reese Motivation Profile, and learn what is motivating your mental mistakes and how to improve. That's iaimtowin.com.
No taxation without tax tiger representation. Do you have the IRS breathing down your neck? If so, you need a tiger on your side. Tax Tiger. These guys are crazy good at what they do, outperforming the industry settlement acceptance rate by 3-1, settling 2/3 of their cases for $100 or less. In business for 11 years, they have a stable full of tax specialists who have saved their clients over $30 million in back taxes, providing financial freedom and, more importantly, peace of mind. They've earned their stripes with an A+ Better Business Bureau rating and a founding member of the National Association of Tax Debt Resolution Companies. Let them step between you and the IRS. After a brief complimentary phone consultation, you'll know exactly where you stand and how much it will cost. They give 10% to charity and all the glory to God. Call Tax Tiger today for your free consultation. 877-712-6060. Remember, no taxation without Tax Tiger representation. 877-712-6060. TaxTiger.com.
Are you an inventor, or do you know an inventor who would like to attempt to have an invention or idea patented and submitted to industry? Call InventHelp, America's largest invention company, and learn how to get your free inventor's information. You'll learn how to attempt to patent your idea and submit it to industry from the company that has helped secure over 7,000 patents. It's a free call, so call now. 1-800-220-9562. That's 1-800-220-9562. Call toll free at 1-800-220-9562. That's 1-800-220-9562. InventHelp is a fee-based company.
SiriusXM announces something very special. Comedy Central Radio.
6 weeks ago, I spotted a hipster. They're the human version of bed bugs. If you see one, there's probably 40 more under your bed judging your music.
Comedy Central Radio. Hours and hours of stand-up comedy from Comedy Central's massive library.
I have no problem with illegal immigration in this country, except for the fact that they don't serve on jury duty. It should be the other way around. They should serve exclusively on jury duty.
Comedy Central Radio on SiriusXM 95.
Sirius XM Left 127, saluting our troops.
I just want to shout out the troops fighting for our freedom.
Sirius XM Left 127.
Okay, we're back. This is Mike Fader, and we're here. If you just tuned into this show for the first time, we're here every Saturday night from 5 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 to 5 West, and from 2:31 a.m. to 6:21 p.m. in Samoa. Go ahead, you're on. Who do we have? Randy from Ohio.
Yes, Mike, are you going to have your blog about before you end your broadcast, Memorial Day in the rearview mirror, since it's Memorial Day weekend?
Oh, yeah, I put out this, you're right, about a year ago exactly, from Memorial Day, which is actually a couple of days after Memorial Day. I put out I thought, really good YouTube production that I did with a listener friend of mine out in Arizona, I think he is, I'm not sure. We put out this YouTube thing about Memorial Day. So actually, I will mention that. Go on YouTube. You should go to YouTube. Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The problem is my laptop is having some issues, and I can't bring up my YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So I thought it'd be...
No, I'm glad you mentioned it, because if you want to, you could go onto YouTube in the next day or two and just put my name in and put Memorial Day and my name and YouTube, and you'll come up with this interesting YouTube video I did about Memorial Day. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, because I enjoy it, because you bring references to what you said earlier, and also about the bonus marches.
The bonus marches, oh, yeah, sure.
So the reason why I wanted you to broadcast was, again, I can't bring up my YouTube on my laptop, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get it fixed. So
No.
I thought it'd be an appropriate way to end your program this evening.
About what? You mean to mention the YouTube thing?
No, the Memorial Day and
yeah. Yeah, no, I can't. I don't think I'm able to play that on here, but people could go there and visit it themselves if they're able to do it. Yeah, no, I'm glad you pointed that out. I forgot all about that.
Okay, that's all I wanted to comment about. Okay.
Yeah, the title is. Thank you very much. The title is called Memorial Day in the Rearview Mirror. I published this on YouTube. I put this on YouTube a couple of days after Memorial Day, so check it out if you want. It's kind of a better version with some interesting music and video about what I was just saying, and it's on YouTube. Who do we have next? Bob from Tennessee. Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well, Mike, and you're doing very good too. Another great show.
Thanks.
I like both of your guests today. I have a notebook full of notes, and I truly love your monologues. They're outstanding.
Thank you.
Cognitive dissonance for sure, but once in a while surprises happen. AP News actually reported the protests against Monsanto today across the country.
Well, that's good to see. I mean, because usually the media shuts all this stuff down. Yeah.
One thing I would like to mention to you, and I need your help on this, or somebody's help who is on the World Wide Web, on the internet, because I am not. My last telephone bill from Credo I got reported that 51,000 people, Credo activists, had pledged to commit dignified, peaceful civil disobedience and get arrested if the president takes the next step to approve the Keystone Extreme Tar Sands pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Then this last week in The Nation magazine, they reported that the number had swelled to 59,000 people. And to my mind, that is terrific. And I'm very happy about that. Now, I called Tom Hartman yesterday to tell him about it, and I asked him if he had Credo telephone service, and he left the listeners with the impression that Credo was only a landline. But it's not. They have mobile service.
This is spelled, by the way, let me interrupt for a second. This is spelled CREDO, and it's a kind of alternative way to have phone service and also do the right thing in the world.
That's correct. They contribute, I think it's 10% of their profits to different organizations such as the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, Greenpeace, a whole list of organizations. Every year I get a form to fill out that I can designate what percentage that I think should go to each different organization, whether it's the National Lawyers Guild or Color of Change, or whoever I choose. And they also act as a clearinghouse on credoaction.com for activists to get together. They don't actually do these things. They put the people in touch with the organizations that are doing the organizing.
Right. So if people could go to the website, like Credo, right? To then go to Credo, the website and the phone service.
That's right. And I mean, you know, like Verizon is anti-union, AT&T supports ALEC.
And none of them pay their taxes.
That's a fact for sure. So since people have phones anyway, they might as well be on the right side of things.
Okay.
As much as possible.
All right. Thanks for pointing that out. And Credo, CREDO. We have a full switchboard, I'm informed, so I should take another call. Who? Peter from New Jersey. You're on the radio.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, excellent little monologue you had going there. And I agree with you 100%. I can't even stomach this Barack Obama or listening to him any longer. Not to say I voted for him actually both times. I'm not. I'm a liberal. I grew up in a conservative family. I live in a conservative area of New Jersey. But in all of my liberal ideals, he has let me down over and over and over again. And you touched on Guantanamo, the disgrace of Guantanamo, and how you can't even stand listening to him talking about closing it anymore when he hasn't done a damn thing in all this time that he's been president. But how about like the drone strikes, right? And the way he's the way he's treating whistleblowers, how secretive and how and I can't understand how a man could come in. Is it the system? Does he get absorbed into the system of corruption, or is he just a corrupt man who lied his ass all the way into office?
See, isn't that the way it is? Every time you hear this guy say something, you always have to wonder to yourself, is this what he really believes, that his government is, his people under his orders are acting this way? Does he actually believe in that? In other words, not taxing the rich, not locking up bankers, blowing up innocent people overseas, keeping people in Guantanamo. Does he really believe that? Or is he part of a system which basically hired him to do that? Or is he actually crazy?
That's what I can't figure out.
I can't either. No one seems to be able to figure it out. But you know what? It doesn't, in the end, it doesn't even matter what the reason is. The fact is that he keeps doing it.
And I just can't stomach it anymore.
Well, it's too bad. I'm sorry, go ahead.
In fact, when he was running, I've never taken a party affiliation. But when he ran, I became a Democrat just to vote for him in the primary because I wouldn't vote for Hillary. The reason I wouldn't vote for Hillary is because of her vote on the war. She publicly voted for Iraq. And I could not get past that she voted to go to war in Iraq. And he voted against, or he claimed, he wasn't in the Senate at the time. That was just before he got into the Senate. So he doesn't have a record on that, although he claims he was against it. So, and at this time now, it seems that they're winding up to have Hillary's going to try to run the second time now.
You know, they're all the same. It doesn't matter which one of them runs. They're all part of the same corporation.
The only one I really like who's working right now at Capitol Hill is Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, despite her some things she's done, some of her flaws, she's the one I would vote for. If I voted for a Democrat again ever, it would be her.
She's the only one I could see that actually stands up and speaks to the truth out. And especially about the banking system and how corrupt and rotten that is.
The other day she was holding hearings. It was about a week ago. She was holding hearings with the heads of these banks, and they delivered the same, cognitive dissonant bullshit to her that they had to everybody else who basically kissed their ass on TV. And she leaned forward and she said, "Excuse me, do you really believe what you're saying? Do you understand what you're telling us here?" In other words, she really lit into them like nobody else has. I know.
Did you hear her go off when they came up with the amount of money that they were going to use for the for the mortgages?
Yeah, I heard that, and I also heard her when she went after the Justice Department when they testified. And she said, "I want you to explain to me why none of these people are in jail. I want you to explain it to me right now, right here." I mean, she's really something. Anyhow,
but that's the only voice I hear of reason that comes out of that. That whole establishment.
All right, listen, we've got to, engineers telling me we should take some more calls because we do have a full switchboard. So,
all right, it was great talking to you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for calling. Who do we have? Randy, is it? Fanny, you're on, Fanny.
Hey, Mike. Actually, it's Jimmy. Fanny didn't want to take the...
Oh, okay, go ahead, Jimmy.
But I wanted to say, you said the first 100 callers get absolutely nothing. So I really want to be a Zen Buddhist, and nothing is what I want.
Well, you know what? That's what you're getting then. So it's come true for you.
But basically, I don't need to shower you with compliments, and
oh, please feel free.
All right, I love you, and
I love you too, Jimmy. So, what do you think after the show? Maybe get together.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No.
Yeah. No. Thank you. I appreciate it. No. Thank you. I do appreciate.
A bunch of your previous callers pretty much said a lot of what I would have said. Mm-hmm. So there's no reason for me to repeat this stuff. But Fanny did ask me to ask you if you knew more about the history of Guantanamo. She mentioned something about it opening in 1912 on Cuban soil, probably illegally, like everything the United States did.
When the United States had its war with Spain, because the United States was getting upset that it didn't have an empire like all the other European countries had, when they had the war with Spain, they quote unquote won from Spain after they defeated Spain, the Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. They won them, right? So that means they own them. And one thing they did was either immediately, like 1900, or a few years afterwards, I don't know the exact date, they opened up a naval station, which makes sense tactically if you look at where the map is. You look at the map. They opened up a naval station on the tip of Cuba, even after returning something called sovereignty to Cuba, which it never really was, since Cuban governments repeatedly, since Castro, were essentially subdivisions of American corporate interests in the mafia and the CIA. They opened up a naval base there, but Cuba belonged to the United States after the war with Spain in 1899 and 1900. That's the history of it.
And then there was one other thing I wanted to say regarding Barack Obama. Obviously, he's a puppet working for the corporations. I think years ago, his wife was on a plane with the children, and there was a near collision on one of the runways, and I don't think that was an accident. I think it was a threat to him, like, you play by our rules. I really don't want to give the guy any credit because I think he's a bit of a scumbag because he's not. But
there is since you mentioned it, there is a popular notion floating around, and who knows, right, that he does a lot of these stuff because he and his family's life is in jeopardy. Who knows? I don't really know. And we'll never know.
We won't know, but I kind of get that feeling because Air Force Two, so to speak, there's no way that an air traffic controller would allow another plane to come close to hitting his wife's plane.
Well, you know what? He ran for office one time. If that was made clear to him, you know what? He could have chosen not to run again.
Why do you think he was so depressed when he had to do the debates?
You think that's it? He wanted to retire, but they threatened him like the mob would threaten somebody.
Exactly. That's
All right.
My gut feeling.
Okay, I got to move on. Take another call.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I really appreciate your show.
Okay, Jimmy. Thanks for calling. Who do we have? Jim from Louisiana. You're on.
Yeah, Mike, great show again.
Thanks.
Cognitive dissonance kind of reminds me, I'm going to go back to Orwell's 1984, the three-line slogan, war is peace, love is hate.
Oh, sure.
Is strength.
It's great you brought that up because nobody has ever written about this better than Orwell in 1984 and in 1984. Basically, they tell you one thing and you're supposed to believe it. And after a while, they keep telling you long enough, like in North Korea, people actually do believe it. They fall into kind of a crazy trance where everything
Not just North Korea, here in America. I mean, all the pharmaceutical industrial complex telling you about all these drugs. It's a minute commercial. It tells you 20 seconds how great the drug is, and 40 seconds is spent telling you to watch for the side effects. Side effects like suicide.
I love those ads where you see some woman who's depressed, right? And there's basically a gray film over the screen. So she's depressed. It's raining on her, right? And other people behind her are jumping up and down and they're happy and they're holding hands, but she's miserable. All of a sudden she takes Frexalex and all of a sudden there are actually butterflies flying around her head. The gray film lifts and she's happy again. Like you said, this is for like 15 seconds. Then the announcer comes on and says real fast, and all the stuff is printed out below that only an ant walking on it could read it. Frexalex may cause your liver to explode, your brain to fall out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is what the whole culture is cognitive dissonance.
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, another thing real quick. I was thinking, what the other caller was saying, whether Obama was forced or not. I mean, I think he could have come in with the best intentions, but aside of that, all they have to do is show him a copy of the movie JFK and say, "Boy, I'd be ashamed if something happened to you, Mr. President," or if something happened to your wife's airplane, or if you just
Or maybe maybe we're going to take one more call, but maybe what he did was and this is the oldest story. This is a story that goes back thousands of years. Maybe he just signed a bargain with the devil and sold his soul. You want to be president for 2 terms of the United States of America, and he's a grandiose guy, then this is what you pay for it. You do what we tell you.
Yeah, well, I mean, he made history. So, all right, Mike, thanks a lot, buddy.
Hey, thanks for calling. Let's take one more short call. We have about a minute. Who's our next caller? Brad from Indiana. I only got about a minute or so for you.
Hey, Mike. This is Brad.
Hey, Brad.
Just a quick revisit of Memorial Day. I'm a veteran. I served in Vietnam in 1969 and 70.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until much later that I found out that basically, and I hate to use the term false flag because it gets into the loony bin area, but that the Gulf of Tonkin never really happened. The USS Maddox was not attacked by PT boats, but it was a pretext to start a war that killed 58,000 American soldiers and 58,000 plus more suicides and hundreds of thousands of walking wounded since.
Not to mention 1 million people over in Vietnam.
1 million Cambodians and Vietnamese. And the same thing eventually happened again, and it happens over and over again. And we had the same thing in Iraq and Afghanistan. Now we've got, instead of Agent Orange, we've got DU, and we've got Gulf War syndrome from burning chemical weapons. And we've got as many, if not more, from that particular war than from my war. There's never a good war, very rarely. All we do is break things. We never fix things. It's just amazing that the American people can get so excited over the fact that, and I think one reason is because nobody's got any skin in the game. If you started to conscript young Americans again, you would find that popularity for war would fall off dramatically.
That's the truth. That's why the volunteer army, which was invented by Nixon and his pals, is a great stroke of evil genius.
Mike?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Cut out.
Oh, well, listen, I'm right up against the end of the show here, but it's Memorial Day. You paid your dues over there, and for what, right? And everybody else in the same boat. And yeah, I think on Memorial Day, what we need to do now is probably take the word memorial. We should remember why this country was founded and how it was founded and how we got so lost. That's what we should remember.
Precisely. And people have died. I mean, I lost friends. You die for each other. You fight for each other. You're not fighting for the United States. I know that sounds...
No, I understand.
Sounds very, very offensive to say. But you're really, really not fighting. You don't think about Mom, apple pie, and Chevrolet when you're over there. You think about the buddy that's next to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about wanting to come home. And you think about hoping your friends come home. And that's what you think about. But when you're young, and it's easy to fall into a trap and not be intellectually aware of what's happening and not understanding history. This is hardly a new phenomenon. It started...
Yeah, I know. We're straight up against the end of the hour here, so.
Okay, well, I appreciate your time, Mike.
No, and I appreciate your calling. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for calling. All right, that's it for this week. We're out of here, and we'll be back next week with more guests and more commentary.
Well, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. That's my story. Oh, that's my story. Well, I ain't got a witness, and I can't prove it, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. you see by the dawn's early light.
Ed Schultz on Sirius XM Left.
Killing the service for a reason.